hostile briefings and...
Can I just say to a couple of you, if you don't want the budget, make your mind up now.
Nobody wants this budget, Mr. Speaker. With resignations, hostile briefings and leaks galore, even just in the last 10 minutes, an unprecedented leak of the OBR analysis. Mr. Speaker, these leaks have been so serious that even the former chief economist of the Bank of England has said, and I quote, that Labour's fiscal fandango is the single biggest reason why growth has flatlined. Does the Prime Minister agree with Andy Haldane, and does he have an explanation for this complete shambles?
We all know the biggest shambles in living history, the Liz Truss budget. And what did she say at the time? Did she say, I don't agree, this must be wrong? No, she said, I think Liz Truss is 100% right. 100%. Not much room for flexibility. Not one thing was wrong with it, in her view. So we won't be taking lectures from her. Matters for the OBR. The Chancellor will set out the budget in just a few minutes' time.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, we're talking about the leaks. The Prime Minister doesn't seem to appreciate the impact of these budget leaks on the UK economy. Even the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister has said this morning that the leaks were unacceptable. So will the Prime Minister launch an investigation into the budget leaks and punish those responsible?
Mr. Speaker, it's literally about 25 minutes before the budget will be set out in all, where we'll take further decisions. The Chancellor will set it out, but thanks to the decisions she's already taken, we've got 5 million extra NHS appointments, waiting lists are coming down, mortgages are cheaper, we've expanded free school meals. That's 100,000 children lifted out of poverty, a moral mission for this government. Compare that to the record opposite any day of the week.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about the decisions she's already taken. If they were that great, we wouldn't have all those farmers outside protesting. He doesn't want to talk about leaks, but we can see that the chaos in Number 10 is having real-world consequences. Instead of focusing on the economy, they've been fighting like rats. Several journalists reported that Number 10 sources had briefed against the Health Secretary and other senior cabinet ministers. The Prime Minister then told us that these briefings did not come from Number 10. Will he repeat on the floor of the House the claim that none of his advisers has briefed against members of the Cabinet?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've been really clear about this. No one in Number 10 has briefed against Cabinet ministers. And the Health Secretary is doing a fantastic job. He stood before the electorate just before the last election. He said we'd deliver 2 million extra appointments for the NHS in the first year of a Labour government. There he is. What did he do? Not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 million extra appointments for the NHS. They don't understand this language, Mr. Speaker, because they left everything absolutely broken.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister expects us to believe him. No one does. We all know that he did not have a serious leak inquiry. What he did, Mr. Speaker, was he asked Morgan McSweeney to investigate Morgan McSweeney, and then Morgan McSweeney discovered that Morgan McSweeney was innocent. All of this calls into question the Prime Minister's judgment. All of this calls into question the Prime Minister's judgment. We read this weekend that he wants the former Deputy Prime Minister back in his cabinet. He must have forgotten that she had to resign only a few months ago for tax evasion. When did the Prime Minister decide that lawbreakers can be lawmakers?
Mr. Speaker, while she's scrolling through Twitter, we've delivered rail fares frozen, prescription charges frozen, the minimum wage boosted. We're focusing on the cost of living, the single most important thing for this country. She's focusing on tittle-tattle.
Kemi Badenoch.
It's not tittle-tattle, Mr. Speaker. We all know that he's only talking about welcoming the Deputy Prime Minister back because he is desperate to shore up his crumbling leadership. But if he were to welcome her back, will he set a condition that she must pay back the £40,000 of property taxes she avoided, the same property taxes they're very happy to put on everyone else, and will she also return her £17,000 of severance pay?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the former Deputy Prime Minister is the biggest social mobility story this country has ever told. She started from humble beginnings and fought her way to the very top. I'm very proud of what she's achieved in politics. I'm very proud of everything she's done for this Labour government.
Kemi Badenoch.
That sounds like a no, Mr. Speaker. I've never heard the Prime Minister speak so highly of people avoiding their taxes. But in summary, this just looks like a government that is a slow-motion car crash. His cabinet are briefing against each other, his MPs are planning for life after him, and the most chaotic run-up to a budget in recent memory is happening on his watch. Even the Chief Whip is telling MPs that he wants out. The truth is simple, Mr. Speaker. His MPs don't trust him, the markets don't trust him, and the public certainly don't trust him. When will he finally accept that the chaos starts and ends with him?
The most chaotic budget was the Liz Truss budget. It did huge damage to our country. We're still suffering from that damage. And what did she say about Liz Truss? She obviously does still think it. When asked, was Liz Truss right? 100% right, she said. The most chaotic, damaging budget there's ever been. And she sticks by it. I'm very interested to see her response to this budget if she thinks Liz Truss got it right. Mr. Speaker, what we're doing is focusing on cutting waiting lists, cutting the national debt, cutting the cost of living, renewing our country, a Labour budget with Labour values, delivering for the British people.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the moment, everyone is being bombarded with adverts and emails for Black Friday, encouraging them to spend money on so-called time-limited deals, leading to panic buying, increasing debt, buyer regret, and not to mention the impact on the planet, with delivery and returns of goods responsible for millions of tonnes of CO2 emissions. Does he agree with me that instead of rushing to buy online, people should look to their high streets to support local businesses and keep money in the local economy this Christmas?
Well, I want to see our high streets thriving, and we encourage everyone to support local businesses this Christmas. Through our small business strategy, we've got £3 billion boost to help small businesses expand, and we've tackled the most significant reforms to tackle late payments, the most significant in 25 years, Mr. Speaker. And the Chancellor will have to say more about that in just a moment.
Ed Davey, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've just seen in the leaked OBR documents that taxes are going up to a historic record high. So will the Prime Minister explain why Labour is hiking people's taxes instead of fixing the £90 billion Brexit black hole in the public finances by growing our economy with a new, detailed, brilliant trade deal with our European partners?
Well, he'll only have to wait a few minutes for the full details of the budget. But, Mr. Speaker, every week he comes here with the same problem. He always wants more spending, and he never wants to say how he's going to raise the money for it. The two things can't go together.
Sir Ed Davey.
Speaker, we want to grow the economy, not tax the economy. But if I can take him on to another issue, Mr. Speaker, I hope everyone in the House shares my alarm that a former leader of a political party in Wales has been found guilty of betraying our country and has now been sentenced to over 10 years in prison for his treachery. The Prime Minister said that Reform should hold an independent investigation, and he is right, but we both know that that's not going to happen. So given Reform won't, he must. So will he now launch a national investigation into Russian infiltration into our politics?
Well, he's right to highlight this very serious case, a long sentence for pro-Russian bribery in the Reform Party at the highest level. You would think a leader of a political party would want to get to the bottom of that and ask the question, how on earth did that happen in the Reform Party? And what other links are there between Reform and Russia? But no, the leader of Reform doesn't want to do it because, Mr. Speaker, we know he doesn't want to know the answer to the question because Reform is riddled with pro-Putin propaganda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of traffic chaos and increasingly creative traffic diversions, residents of Parkside and Marston Grange in my constituency are beginning to wonder whether the A513 at Beaconside is a permanent monument to the traffic cone. In the time that Staffordshire County Council and Taylor Wimpey have taken to complete one stretch of road, we've had 6 Prime Ministers, not to mention Notre Dame burned down and was rebuilt using medieval building techniques. So what can be done to hold developers and local authorities properly to account so that essential infrastructure is delivered on time with minimum disruption?
Well, it's staggering that an important upgrade for drivers to improve their journeys has been delayed for 8 long years. And I understand the scheme is currently being held up by the Reform-led council, Kel Sabri, who are proving as hopeless in local government as everybody anticipated. Mr. Speaker, we've invested £24 billion in our roads, and I call on Staffordshire Council to end the delay, get on with the job, and get this scheme started for her constituents.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. University Hospitals Sussex currently have 350 people, well enough to go home, for occupying beds. That is the same number of beds as in Princess Royal Hospital in Haywards Heath in my constituency. The reason they can't go home is because there is no social care package for them to go to. This is terrible for them, puts strain on the trust and is ruinous to the taxpayer. Given there is no urgent plan to reform social care, what is the Prime Minister's plan to bring them home for Christmas?
Well, as she knows, we are reforming social care, and I've asked Baroness Casey to lead on that. And she's had the first of her cross-party meetings to build consensus, which is obviously what we need on this. As I've said out a number of times, the first phase will report in 2026, so we can reform as we go on. There will obviously be a phase after that. And I remind the House we've already boosted social care funding by £3.7 billion, record increases also to the carers allowance, and £500 million for the first ever fair pay agreement to properly recognise and reward carers.
Luke Kirkhurst.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Prime Minister aware that because of the decision by Reform's Durham County Council to scrap support introduced by Labour in 2013, a typical working family in Stanley will be £170 worse off? How would the Prime Minister contrast the values of this Labour government with a Reform Party dividing our country and hitting working people in their pockets?
Well, I thank him for raising this. The more we see of Reform, the more we see their true colours. In this case, making people £170 worth off. But their true colours also in relation to the member for Clacton. His explanation, Mr. Speaker, in recent days, in relation to the stories about what he may have said in the past, is unconvincing, to say the least. He says he never engaged with racism with intent. With intent. What does that mean? Didn't engage with racism with intent. I have no doubt that if a young Jewish student was hissed at to mimic the sound of a gas chamber, they would find it upsetting. He may want to forget that. They won't. He clearly remembers some of what happened. He should seek those people out and go and apologise to them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Lewis, not his real name, is an Eastbourne boy with special educational needs who was left traumatised after his passenger assistant relentlessly and brutally restrained him on his home-to-school transport. It only became clear to Lewis's mum, who is in the gallery today, what happened on that day when he returned home visibly distressed and bruised. And that's because, shockingly, there is no statutory requirement to report incidents of physical restraint on school transport, nor national training standards. So will the Prime Minister address this loophole in his upcoming SEND reforms to ensure that SEND children in Eastbourne and beyond can travel to school with the safety and dignity that they deserve?
Well, can I say to him and to Lewis's mum, who's with us, that incidents like that should not be happening. I know that he's met, I think, with the Education Minister to discuss this. Every child should have tailored support, including on transport to school, and I can reassure him and Lewis's mum that that principle will be central to our reforms.
Jenny Riddle-Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, Roman Osborne, a 10-year-old in my constituency, hand-delivered a letter to 10 Downing Street to tell the Prime Minister about an accident that he had outside his primary school of Trimley St Martin in February, which left him spending 3 days in hospital and many, many more months recovering. Mr Speaker, will the Prime Minister back my campaign, Safer and at the Gates, and will he call on Tory-led Suffolk County Council to do the right thing and re-review the road and put the right safety measures in place outside Trimley St Martin and the other schools in my constituency?
Can I thank her for that and thank Roman for his letter, which I took time to read last night. And I wanted just to read a short sentence from it, from Roman. He said this: "This accident wouldn't have happened if there was a safe place to cross the road. I'm concerned for other children's safety, and I don't want another accident like mine to happen again to anyone else." Mr Speaker, what an incredible young boy, aged just 10. I totally agree with him, and I say to Roman, this is what we're going to do. Roman, I've asked ministers to work with all the right people to look at his school and get a safe crossing in place. And the Roads Minister will be happy to meet my honourable friend to discuss the road safety strategy.
Mr Speaker, this morning I met with farmers on Whitehall, and on Saturday farmers supplying milk to family-run White Farms who have been making traditional cheddar cheese near Bruton for 160 years. They all told me, Mr Speaker, the family farm tax as it stands will devastate their businesses. So if he really wants growth, will the Prime Minister listen to farmers, industry, the EFRA Select Committee, even his own MPs, and pause and rethink this damaging and regressive tax?
Mr Speaker, we've invested a record £11.8 billion into sustainable farming this Parliament, and we set out a 25-year farming roadmap focused on increasing year-on-year productivity and profitability in farms. That is vitally important.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last week, the COVID inquiry reported that 23,000 deaths occurred in England in the first wave of the pandemic that could have been prevented due to the UK response being too little too late. These were not just 23,000 deaths, Mr Speaker. These were 23,000 people who had family and friends who loved them, and valuable lives that were cut short due to an abysmal failure of leadership by Boris Johnson and his government. They were categorically failed by a Prime Minister who prevaricated, delayed and prioritised political expediency over making the tough decisions that could have averted tragedy. If the Prime Minister were to lead us through the next pandemic, will he value saving lives above all else?
Well, she's right. The report is a sombre moment, and it's important to remember the scale of suffering and the scale of the loss of life, which is made clear in the testimonies of the families in the report, and to remember the incredible contribution of frontline workers and everyone who focused on protecting others. Mr Speaker, we're committed to learning the lessons needed from the COVID inquiry to protect and prepare us for the future. And the pandemic does still weigh heavily on our public finances and our NHS. That's why we've already conducted a pandemic exercise to test preparedness and agreed a historic global pandemic agreement to improve our ability to prevent global disease threats alongside our partners.
Madam Dance. Mr Speaker, I hope the Prime Minister will agree with me that the defence industry in Somerset is a key engine for growth, jobs and innovation. Leonardo in Yeovil is making a fantastic progress with the Proteus uncrewed helicopter, but the future of that project, thousands of jobs at the site in Yeovil and the 320 million Leonardo contribute to local GDP is dependent on the new medium helicopter contract. Will the Prime Minister reassure my constituents that he supports the industry in Yeovil, and will his government finally get round to awarding this long overdue contract?
Well, can I pay tribute to those in Somerset and his constituency in the defence sector, which is hugely important to our country and our security. I can confirm we're continuing with the establishment procurement process for the new medium helicopter programme to deliver modern equipment for our armed forces. That's part of the biggest sustained boost to our defence since the Cold War, and I'm determined to see a defence dividend of investment in British jobs and apprentices, including in his constituency. Mr Speaker, that builds on the £8 billion Typhoon deal that we've secured, the £4 billion maritime deal with Indonesia, and the £10 billion frigate deal with Norway.
Serena Blackenbridge.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I joined Wensfield Men walking and talking on International Men's Day, a fantastic group who are strengthening our community through good company and what Stephen calls a growing band of brothers. In an age of pressure, polarisation and endless phone scrolling, they bring men together to support one another. Will the Prime Minister join me in congratulating all involved and explain how the first ever men's health strategy will back similar grassroots initiatives?
Can I thank her? It is so important that men have the space and support from their peers to discuss their mental health. Can I thank Men Walking and Talking for the work that they do that makes such a difference? We were proud to launch our men's health strategy last week to get more men the support they need. Mr Speaker, I wanted to take a moment to thank my honourable friend for Cannock Chase for his honesty and bravery on International Men's Day. And I say again, men speaking so truthfully about their experiences is so powerful and inspires more to do the same. He's a credit to this House.
Great job.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Consequential to President Trump's misunderstanding of Putin's assessment going forward into... I've got it completely wrong, so let me do it without notes. There we are. What a day to do it. President, I can't... You know, I've completely lost it, and I apologise. So let me read it. Let me read it, because I'm going to carry on. I'm afraid the Prime Minister's not going to get away that easy. So, consequential to President Trump's misunderstanding of Putin's strategic intent for both Ukraine and Europe is the Prime Minister's solemn responsibility to keep this country safe. Given the hypersonic missile threat and the ballistic missile threat, known threat from Russia, and the fact that the United Kingdom has no current counter to that, what is the Prime Minister going to do to keep this country safe from those that have already threatened us?
I thank him for his question and his contribution to this important debate, and of course the contribution he made yesterday as well. It is the first duty of the Prime Minister to keep this country safe. It's the duty that is paramount and above all else, and I take it extremely seriously and treat it as my #1 priority. We review our security and defence arrangements all of the time, and we are particularly a leading member in NATO, which is the single most effective military alliance the world has ever seen.
Ben Coleman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My constituents in Chelsea and Fulham tell me that our top national priority must remain, as it is, economic growth. So does the Prime Minister agree that the swiftest way... Does the Prime Minister agree that the swiftest way to achieve growth is for the government to be even more ambitious in negotiating with the European Union to remove the new red tape and trade barriers that have been holding back UK businesses, especially small and medium-sized ones, since the Conservatives' poorly managed exit from the European Union?
Well, the deal we struck with the EU will deliver on what the British public voted for last year, which is, as he says, boosting economic growth and restoring positive relations. And the deal we've struck is worth £9 billion to our economy in 2040. It includes an SBS agreement to cut supermarket prices and boost export opportunities. And the tourism reform would rip up that deal and leave us all paying more at the checkout.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to economic growth, this Labour government is all talk and no action. So maybe I can help the Prime Minister. Roadworks and traffic jams cost the UK economy £8 billion last year. This affects my constituents in Broxbourne every single day. They want to know what the government is doing about it, when the government is going to back working people and get Britain moving.
Under this government, growth is the highest in the G7 for the first half of this year. Under the last government, they crashed the economy.
Emily Darwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday was the UN International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, otherwise known as White Ribbon Day, in Milton Keynes and many other places. Will the Prime Minister join with me in congratulating Mr. Speaker on his commitment that this House will become the first national white ribbon parliament in the world? And will he join me, Mr. Speaker, and many members from across this House in making the white ribbon promise to never use, excuse, or remain silent about men's violence against women?
Can I thank her for raising this really important issue? And I'm really proud, Mr. Speaker, on what you've done with this Parliament in relation to the White Ribbon campaign. We must then turn that from a ribbon into action. And I am really proud that this government is fully committed to tackling violence against women and girls. It is a political commitment, it is a personal commitment from me, and we'll do everything we can in relation to reducing violence against women and girls, which is pernicious. It is far more widespread than people appreciate, and we absolutely have to stop talking and start doing in relation to this.
Final question, Liz Saville-Roberts.
From his previous answer, we can only conclude that the Prime Minister has faith in the member of Clacton to police his own party on Russian interference. But the leader of Reform has already said that this is beyond his capabilities. Why, therefore, is the Prime Minister so unwilling to take responsibility and launch a full investigation into foreign interference in our democracies?
Interference in our democracy, but the responsibility for the investigation of what happened in Reform lies with the leader of the Reform Party. Mr. Speaker, he's usually got plenty to say, and now he's totally silent on one of the most important issues. Mr. Speaker, he needs to speak up and answer those questions.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.
Point of order, Melstride.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On a point of order, Madam Deputy Speaker, this morning we have seen an unprecedented leak of the OBR's Economic and Fiscal Outlook report before the budget. This report contains market-sensitive information. It is utterly outrageous that this has happened, and this leak may indeed constitute a criminal act. In Prime Minister's questions, the Leader of the Opposition asked the Prime Minister about this leak, but he refused to answer her question. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, please can you advise this House what steps are at its disposal to force a leak inquiry into this matter? And would it be possible to ask the Table Office to distribute copies of the report given to the House, given that everybody outside of this House has already had the opportunity to read it?
Order! This is not a point of order for the Chair. The Chancellor is about to make her budget statement, and I expect members and their constituents wish to hear from the Chancellor directly. However, before I call the Chancellor to speak, I nonetheless wish to make a short statement. For a number of weeks, and yet again yesterday, there have been extensive briefings to the media on the government's fiscal policy and public finances. This disappointing trend in relation to budget briefings has been growing for a number of years under successive governments, but appears to have reached an unprecedented high. Weeks ago, we saw the Chancellor delivering a speech in Downing Street, setting the scene for the budget, as well as specific policy announcements being briefed out to the media in advance of today's financial statements. I don't need any help. And just a moment ago, it seems the OBR analysis has also appeared online. This all falls short of standards that the House expects. The premature disclosure of the contents of the budget has always been regarded as a supreme discourtesy to this House and to all the democratically elected members, not to mention to Mr Speaker and to myself, the Chairman of Ways and Means. The Government's own ministerial code cannot be clearer, as set out in paragraph 9.1. When Parliament is in session, the most important announcements of government policy should be made in the first instance to Parliament. Mr Speaker has always upheld the rights of this House and its members to be treated with respect and to be the first to hear major government policy announcements on behalf of their constituents. As Chairman of Ways and Means, I have responsibility to oversee the House's consideration of the budget statement and the ensuing resolutions, which are described in erstwhile paragraph 36-33 as the most important business of Ways and Means in this House. I want honourable members on all sides of the House to have adequate opportunity to hold the Chancellor to account, rather than hear and read about new policies on a daily basis in the media. And, like many, I also expected better. Before I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I remind honourable members that copies of the budget resolutions will be available to them from the vote office in members' lobby at the end of the Chancellor's statement and online. Shh. I also remind honourable members that interventions are not taken during the Chancellor's statement, nor during replies to the Leader of the Opposition or the Leader of the Liberal Democrats. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Chancellor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it is my understanding that the Office of Budget Responsibility's Economic and Financial Outlook was released on their website before this statement. This is deeply disappointing and a serious error on their part. The Office of Budget Responsibility have already made a statement taking full responsibility for their breach. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are rebuilding our economy. Over the last 16 months, we have overhauled our planning system to get Britain building, forged new trade deals with the United States, India and the European Union, reformed our visa system to bring the brightest and the best to Britain. We've changed our fiscal rules that we inherited from the Conservatives and raised public investment to its highest level in 4 decades. And in last year's budget, I raised taxes on business and the wealthiest to close the £22 billion black hole in the public finances left by the party opposites. And we used that money to fund the biggest ever settlement for our National Health Service. They were the fair and necessary choices, and we faced opposition to them, from opponents to planning reform, who will always demand that the future is built somewhere else, not in their backyard. Opponents to trade, who want to take us down the path of isolation and division. Opponents to investment, who believe that the only good thing a government can do is get out of the way. Opponents who insist that the only way to balance the books is to cut public spending. And opponents who say that we don't need to balance the books at all. But we made these choices for a reason. Because after 14 years of Conservative government, working people demanded and deserved change. Investment, not cuts to our public services. Stability for our public finances, the single most important factor in getting the cost of living down. And economic growth, the best means to improve wages, create jobs and support public services. That is what our plan, that is what this government and our Prime Minister are all about. Today's budget builds on the choices that we have made since July last year. To cut NHS waiting lists, to cut the cost of living, and to cut debt and borrowing. No doubt we will face opposition again, but I have yet to see a credible or a fairer alternative plan for working people. These are my choices, the right choices for a fairer, a stronger and more secure Britain.
Order. Far too much noise, and I expected so much better from you, Dr. Luke Evans. You're meant to be a leader in your community. Simmer down, Chancellor.
I'm happy for them to shout as much as they like, Madam Deputy Speaker, as long as they do it from the opposition benches where they can't cause any more damage. I said there would be no return to austerity, and I meant it. This budget will maintain investment in our economy and in our National Health Service. I said I would cut the cost of living, and I meant it. This budget will bring down inflation and provide immediate relief for families. I said I would cut debt and borrowing, and I meant it. Because of this budget, borrowing will fall as a share of GDP in every year of this forecast. Our net financial debt will be lower at the end of the forecast than it is today, and I will more than double the headroom against our stability rule to £21.7 billion, meeting our stability rule and meeting it a year early. These are my choices, not austerity, not borrowing, not turning a blind eye to unfairness. My choices are a budget for fair taxes, strong public services and a stable economy. That is the Labour choice. Growth is the engine that carries every one of our ambitions forward, through stability, investment and reform. The platform from which British ambition can finally get moving again. Because growth doesn't just appear out of thin air. It is built patiently and stubbornly by people who take risks, by founders who bet their savings on an idea, by firms breaking into new markets, developing new technologies and creating new jobs and new opportunities, by the men and the women who work hard every day in all parts of our country. Our job is not to watch from the sidelines, but to partner with them, backing them every step of the way, to match private enterprise with public ambition. I would like to thank my team of officials at the Treasury for their hard work in preparing this budget. In the spring, the Office of Budget Responsibility forecast that our economy would grow by 1% this year. I said then that Britain would defy the forecasts, and defy them we have. The OBR have upgraded Britain's growth for this year from 1% to 1.5%, reaching the same conclusions as the IMF, the OECD and the Bank of England, who have already upgraded their forecasts. Today, the OBR have published the result of their review of the supply side of the economy. They are clear that this is not about the last 14 months. It is about the previous 14 years. The legacy of Brexit and the pandemic, and the damaging decisions by the party opposite. Cutting public spending, leaving communities and entire regions behind, starving our economy of investment and weakening our public services. As a result of their review, the OBR are reducing their expectations for productivity growth by 0.3 percentage points to 1% by the end of the forecast. They say today, and I quote, "Real GDP is forecast to grow by 1.5% on average over the forecast due to lower underlying productivity growth. There is an impact on our public finances too. The OBR say that their productivity forecast will mean £16 billion less in tax receipts by 2030. These forecasts are the Tories' legacy, not Britain's destiny.
Order. It is very hard to hear the Chancellor over all the shouting. And Mr. Holmes, you promised me yesterday you were going to be on top behaviour in the first few minutes. Chancellor.
We beat the forecasts this year and we will beat them again. By boosting trade, not blocking it, by increasing investment, not cutting it, by championing innovation, not stifling it, by backing working people, not making them poorer. Brick by brick, we've been building our economy, building roads, building homes, getting spades in the ground and cranes in the sky. Growth begins with the spark of an entrepreneur. Half of new jobs in Britain are created by scale-up businesses, and we want those jobs created here, not somewhere else. Our job is to make Britain the best place in the world to start up, to scale up and to stay. So we're widening eligibility for our enterprise incentives, so scale-ups can attract the talent and the capital that they need. Expanding the enterprise management incentive so more companies can offer tax-relieved share options. Re-engineering our enterprise investment and venture capital trust schemes so they don't just back early-stage ideas, but stay with companies as they grow. Introducing UK listings relief, a 3-year exemption from stamp duty reserve tax for companies who choose to list here in Britain. And to continue this work, I am launching a call for evidence on how our tax system can better back entrepreneurs, and a targeted review with founders and investors at the heart to make the UK an even more attractive place to grow your business. We are sending a simple message to the world. If you build here, Britain will back you. And our retail investment system should do the same. The UK has some of the lowest levels of retail investment in the G7. And that is not only bad for business, who need that investment to grow, it's bad for savers too. Someone who has invested £1,000 a year in an average stocks and shares ISA every year since 1999 would be £50,000 better off today if they'd put that same money into a cash ISA. And so, from April 2027, I will reform our ISA system, keeping the full £20,000 allowance, while designating 8,000 of it exclusively for investment, with over 65s retaining the full cash allowance. And thanks to our changes to financial advice and guidance, banks will be able to guide savers to better choices for their hard-earned money. Over 50% of the ISA market, including Hargreaves Lansdown, HSBC, Lloyds, Vanguard and Barclays, have signed up to launch new online hubs to help people invest here in Britain. At this budget, consistent with the commitments in our corporate tax roadmap, I will retain our competitive corporation tax rate, the lowest in the G7, and retain our generous full expensing offer for business investments. I will also introduce a new 40% first-year allowance so that businesses can write off more of the cost of their investment up front, while reducing main rate writing down allowances in line with fiscal constraints. Private investment is the lifeblood of economic growth, but growth needs public investment too. When faced with challenges, previous chancellors have chosen to decrease, delay or cancel capital spending. But low investment is the cause of our productivity problem, not the solution. So my choice is not cuts, not stagnation, but to maintain the additional £120 billion of investment that I provided at the spending review. In transport, to link our towns and our cities, energy infrastructure to power our businesses, and housing, so people can live near good jobs, paying decent wages and growing businesses. That is the Labour choice. I'm grateful to the Financial Secretary to the Treasury for his work in driving our growth agenda forward. As we allocate investment for the infrastructure that is the backbone of economic growth across our country, today I will commit investment for the Lower Thames Crossing, And we're continuing to drive investment in city-region transport, in the Midlands Rail Hub and the Transpennine route upgrade, along with our commitments to the Northern Growth Corridor, including Northern Powerhouse Rail. It is this Labour government that has overhauled our planning system, and I will today provide further funding to increase planning capacity through a new skills offer, as called for by the British Chamber of Commerce and the Confederation of British Industry. It is this Labour government that has invested in nuclear power, in Sizewell C and in Culham. We are taking forward our commitment to slash electricity prices for thousands of manufacturing businesses, as Make UK and many others have called for. And today I'm pleased to welcome John Finkelton's report, an ambitious plan to cut the red tape that has tied our nuclear industry in knots for decades. And within 3 months, we will set out our plan for delivering his recommendations. We are proud of our industrial heritage, and we are determined to build the industry of the future so that we buy, make and sell more here in Britain. That's why, as we increase defence spending, we are investing in Portsmouth, in Barrow and in Plymouth. And I'm pleased to be supporting Team Derby, an initiative to drive growth in one of our defence industry hubs. It's why we stepped in to save British Steel in Scunthorpe and invested in Sheffield Forgemasters. And it's why we've changed government procurement so we can buy British when it is crucial to our national security. For steel, for shipbuilding, and today for AI, driving innovation and building that great industry here in Britain. But it's not just what we invest that matters, it's how we invest. Putting money and power back in the hands of local and regional leaders. Today, we are devolving £13 billion of flexible funding for 7 mayors to invest in skills, business support and infrastructure. I'm extending the business rates retention pilots in the West of England, Liverpool City region and Cornwall until 2029. I'm providing £30 million for the Kernow Industrial Growth Fund for sectors like critical minerals and marine innovation. I am establishing the Leeds City Fund, a long-term agreement to retain business rates to fund local regeneration projects like the development of Leeds South Bank, and I am allocating £20 million for the new Peterborough Sports Quarter and £16 million for a science centre in Darlington from the Growth Mission Fund. The benefits of investment the benefits of investment and growth must be built and felt in every part of our United Kingdom. So we are providing an additional £370 million for the Northern Ireland Executive, £505 million for the Welsh Government and £820 million for the Scottish Government over the spending review period through the Barnett formula. And I am making... Sorry, I didn't quite catch that from the SNP. Did they not? Perhaps, Madam Deputy Speaker, they didn't hear. £820 million for the Scottish Government over the spending review period because Anna Sawa asked us to. And I'm making targeted investments in our industrial strategy sectors across the UK. In Northern Ireland, I am providing £17 million to support businesses and strengthen the UK internal market, and backing advanced manufacturing through the Northern Ireland Enhanced Investment Zone. Wales will be the host for 2 AI growth zones, creating more than 8,000 jobs, supported by a £10 million investment in the semiconductors critical for that industry. And we are building the UK's first small modular nuclear reactors with Rolls-Royce at Wilfer in Anglesey. 2 Labour governments working together in Wales to deliver for the people of Wales. And in Scotland, I'm committing over £14 million for low-carbon technologies in Grangemouth, £20 million to renew infrastructure at Inchgreen in Inverclyde, and £20 million to redevelop Kirkcaldy Town Centre and Seafront, with construction starting next year. And that's on top of the UK's biggest ever warship export deal with the Norwegian government to build frigates in Glasgow. Supporting 4,000 jobs. Investment opposed by the SNP. Jobs opposed by the SNP. Defence opposed by the SNP. But secured by this Labour government. A growing economy needs strong foundations of economic stability, with borrowing, inflation down and investment up. That is good for business, and it is good for working people, so they have more money in their pockets. Economic stability, safeguarded by ironclad fiscal rules, is our best defence against rising prices and the best way to improve living standards. We've all seen the alternative. 3 years ago, in their clamour to cut taxes for the richest, the Tories under Liz Truss crashed the economy and sent mortgage rates spiralling and brought pensions to the brink. They've been so loud, Madam Deputy Speaker, and yet I can't even hear them now. Now, I know that the leader of the Green Party is a keen hypnotherapist, and he believes that he can achieve remarkable things using only the power of his mind. Unfortunately, the only things getting bigger under his approach would be the deficit and the rate of inflation. And for all the damage that the Conservative cuts did to our schools and our hospitals, they also doubled the national debt. Our net financial debt this year will be £2.6 trillion, 83% of GDP, meaning that today, 1 in every £10 that government spends is on debt interest. Not on paying down that debt, but just on paying the interest on the debt that we inherited from the Conservatives. My fiscal rules will get borrowing down while supporting investment. The stability rule, that day-to-day expenditure must be met through tax receipts. And the investment rule, which allows me to increase investment whilst getting debt on a downward path. Those fiscal rules are non-negotiable. I met them at the budget last year, I met them in the spring, and I have met them today. While the current budget balance is in deficit by £28.8 billion in 26-27 and £4.6 billion in 27-28, it moves into a surplus of £3.9 billion in 28-29, £21.7 billion in 29-30 and £24.6 billion in 2030-31. More than doubling our headroom against the stability rule and meeting that rule a year early too. And our net financial debt is 83.3% in 26-27, 83.6% in 27-28, 83.7% in 28-29, falling to 83.0% in 29-30 and 82.2% in 2030-31. Madam Deputy Speaker, I said we would cut the debt, and we are, with debt down by the end of the forecast. And going forwards, to support our commitment to a single fiscal event and further strengthen our economic stability, I will follow the recommendations of the International Monetary Fund by assessing the fiscal rules just once a year at the budget. Despite the challenges we face on productivity, the path of our deficit reduction remains broadly the same as in spring. Public sector net borrowing is due to be £112.1 billion, or 3.5% of GDP in 26-27, 3% in 27-28, 2.6% in 28-29, 1.9% in 29-30 and 1.9% in 2030-31, ending at £67.2 billion. Translating into an increase in the net cash requirement next year of £4.2 billion, taking the total to £133.3 billion. According to the IMF, we are due to reduce borrowing more over the rest of this Parliament than any other G7 economy. The Conservatives crashed the economy. We are protecting it. The Conservatives lost control of debt. We are getting debt down. The Conservatives let inflation and interest rates go through the roof. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, since Labour took office, the Bank of England have cut interest rates 5 times. I've made my choices. Not reckless borrowing, not dangerous cuts, but stability for our economy, security for our public finances, and security for family finances too. Those are the Labour choices. Madam Deputy Speaker, Tory austerity left classrooms crumbling and waiting lists sky high, weakened our productivity and choked our economic growth. And now they propose a further £47 billion of cuts to our public services. Well, that is equivalent to cutting every police officer in our country twice over. And then there is Reform, who promise more than £100 billion of cuts, with no details of where those cuts will come from or who will pay for them. A recipe for devastating damage to our public services. People voted for Labour because they wanted roads that aren't full of potholes. They want police on our streets, and they want an NHS that is there when they need it. And we're delivering that. Waiting lists down by 230,000. And not just the 2 million additional appointments we promised, but an additional 5.2 million appointments already delivered since the general election. I joined the Labour Party almost 30 years ago because I could see that the Conservative government that I grew up under didn't care much about schools like mine. Textbooks were rationed. I know that many of you weren't at schools like mine.
There is far too much noise, far too much excitement. People need to calm down a little. Chancellor.
They don't want to hear what the Tories did to schools like mine, but I will tell them. Textbooks rationed, libraries closed, kids herded into porter cabins in the playground, and I came into politics to change that. The money that I allocated at the spending review will fix the crumbling classrooms that the Conservatives left behind and build the schools that they promised but never delivered. And today, thanks to representations from my honourable friends, the members for Wolverhampton North East and Leeds South West and Morley, I will provide £5 million for libraries in secondary schools, building on the £10 million commitment to ensure that every primary school has a school library within this Parliament. And thanks to representations from my honourable friends, the members for Bournemouth East and from Luton North, I am providing £18 million to improve and upgrade playgrounds across England. Madam Deputy Speaker, let there be no doubt that this is a government that is on the side of our kids and who will back their potential. I will not allow the legacies of Conservative neglect to stain our society. Last year, I made changes to the Mine Workers Pension Scheme to ensure that its members receive the fair pensions that they are owed. This year, with thanks to the Minister for Pensions for all his work in this subject, I can go further. I have heard representations from Labour Coalfield MPs, including my honourable friends, the members for Bassetlaw, Blyth and Ashington, Barnsley South, Mansfield and Llanelli. And today I can announce that I will transfer the Investment Reserve Fund of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme to its members. The men and the women who worked in our coal industry get a fair deal in their retirement too. And more. Having heard representations from my honourable friends, the members for Banbury and the member for Edinburgh South West, I will index for inflation on pensions accrued before 1997 in the Pension Protection Fund and the Financial Assurance Scheme, so that people whose pension schemes became insolvent, no fault of their own, no longer lose out as the result of inflation. Last year, I also provided funding to compensate the victims of the infected blood scandal, after the previous government failed to budget for the costs of compensation. This year, I have listened to representations from my honourable friend, the member for Eltham and Chislehurst, and my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West. And I'd like to thank the Minister for Employment for her representations over many years on this subject. As a result, I will exempt all payments from the infected blood scheme from inheritance tax, regardless of the circumstances in which those payments are passed down. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is how we should be spending taxpayers' money, on dealing with injustices and building strong public services, not on waste and inefficiency. At the spending review, I set an ambitious target of £14 billion of efficiencies per year by 2029, and I am grateful to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury for driving that work forward, realising savings through AI and automation, and by scrapping NHS England and reducing back-office staff by 18,000. At this budget, I will find a further £4.9 billion of efficiencies by 2031, getting rid of police and crime commissioners, cutting the cost of politics and local government, and selling government assets that we no longer have any use for. These savings will be required across government, but for our National Health Service, I will reinvest all of these savings back into the care that people rely on. More nurses, more GPs, more appointments. Restoring the services that faltered under years of Conservative decline, and investing in the future of our National Health Service. And today I am announcing £300 million of investment in technology to improve patient service, and 250 new neighbourhood health centres. Expanding more services into communities so that people can receive treatment outside of hospitals and get better, faster care where they live. Over 100 of these will be delivered by 2030, including in Birmingham, Truro and Southall. The Labour Party founded our National Health Service, and we will renew our National Health Service. I will take the same approach for defence spending that I take to NHS spending, reinvesting savings back into our national security. In our age of insecurity, Britain will continue to stand with our allies, working in collaboration to secure a sustainable ceasefire for Ukraine, and maintaining our commitment to NATO, with the UK set to spend 2.6% of GDP on defence by April 2027. Madam Deputy Speaker, the public rightly expects that we stamp out fraud, error and waste, and put that money to good use in our schools and our hospitals and other frontline services. My right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has already announced that she will claw back excess profits from the use of hotels to house asylum seekers, as we phase out the use of those hotels entirely. And we will consult on reforms to indefinite leave to remain and access to taxpayer-funded benefits. The introduction of digital ID will break the link between illegal migration and illegal working. And the HMRC and the Fair Work Agency will crack down on illicit businesses that blight our high streets and undercut illegitimate firms, enforcing the minimum wage, investigating dodgy businesses and increasing scrutiny of the gig economy, as well as tracking down fraudulent business owners who vanish without paying their taxes. And I'd like to thank my honourable friends, the members for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, Lee and Atherton and Kensington and Bayswater for their representations on this subject. And I'll take further steps to prevent and track down unpaid tax, which will together, these reforms will raise nearly £10 billion a year by 2030, including through new powers for HMRC to pursue the promoters of tax avoidance schemes. I am building on our successful use of targeted checks on welfare claims to root out fraud and error and prevent public money being paid to people who are not entitled to it. And I would like to thank Tom Hayhoe, the COVID Corruption Commissioner, for his work in helping to chase down nearly £400 million from dodgy pandemic spending and contracts. contracts handed out by Tory ministers to Tory peers and Tory friends. Well, that money belongs in our schools and in our hospitals.
Order. It is so noisy now, we can barely hear the Chancellor. Everybody needs to calm down. Chancellor.
Well, I wouldn't want any honourable member to miss this. So we are chasing down that money, and we've got almost £400 million back from dodgy pandemic spending and contracts. Tory contracts handed out by Tory ministers to Tory peers and Tory donors. Well, that money belongs in our schools and in our hospitals, and we are getting that money back. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are ramping up sanctions on Russia, and we are freezing known Russian assets. But let me be clear, I don't actually mean the honourable member for Clacton. Under the Conservatives...
Order. We don't need commentary from the backbenches, and Mr Dewhurst, you are so loud. It's remarkable how far your voice carries. Chancellor.
Under the Conservatives, the cost of our welfare system increased by nearly 1 percentage point of GDP, equivalent to £88 billion in just 5 years. The broken welfare system that we inherited wrote off millions of people as too sick to work. And we will reform that system so that it is a system that does not count the cost of failure, but one that protects people who cannot work and empowers those who can. We have brought back face-to-face assessments for disability benefits. Those are the face-to-face assessments that the Shadow Chancellor got rid of when he was Work and Pension Secretary. And our changes to universal credit will get 15,000 people back into work, a figure confirmed today. The former Health Secretary, Alan Milburn, will review the causes of rising youth inactivity, and we are already taking action. I'm grateful to the Federation of Small Businesses and Small Business Britain for their representations on apprenticeships. And today I am announcing funding to make the training for under 25 apprenticeships completely free for small and medium-sized enterprises. And funding our new youth guarantee, providing £820 million over the next 3 years to give young people who are let down by the Conservatives the support and the opportunity that they deserve. Guaranteeing every young person a place in college, an apprenticeship or personalised job support. And after 18 months, 18 to 21-year-olds will be offered paid work, not benefits. The Motability Scheme was set up to protect the most vulnerable, not to subsidise the lease on a Mercedes-Benz. And so I am making reforms that will reduce generous taxpayer subsidies, and Motability have confirmed that they will remove luxury vehicles from their scheme, getting the scheme back to its original purpose of offering cost-effective leases to disabled people. And taxpayers' money should not be spent on pensions for people abroad, who only lived here for a couple of years and may never even have paid a penny in tax. The Conservatives allowed thousands of people living abroad to buy their way into the state pension for as little as £3.50 a week, debasing the purpose of our pension system. And so I will abolish access to Class 2 voluntary national insurance contributions for people living abroad, increasing the time that someone has to live or work in Britain to 10 years and increasing the contributions that they must pay. These reforms improve our welfare system, they support our young people, protect those who need it most, and put an end to Conservative waste and unfairness. Madam Deputy Speaker, to break the cycle of austerity, we need a fair and a sustainable tax system, one that generates revenues to fund the public services that we all use, and supports investment to grow our economy. That does mean that today I am asking everyone to make a contribution. The previous Conservative government froze personal tax thresholds from 2021 to 2028. And today I will maintain all income tax and equivalent national insurance thresholds at their current level for a further 3 years from 2028. While ensuring that people...
Order! The noise is far too high. Chancellor.
The Right Honourable Lady supported these freezes when her party made them. She might want to forget about it, but the British people never will. At the same time, we are ensuring that people only in receipt of the basic or new state pension do not have to pay small amounts of tax through simple assessment from April 2027. I will also keep the Plan 2 student loan repayments threshold at its 2026-27 level for 3 years. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that maintaining these thresholds is a decision that will affect working people. I said that last year, and I won't pretend otherwise now. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am asking everyone to make a contribution, but I can keep that contribution as low as possible because I will make further reforms to our tax system today to make it fairer and to ensure that the wealthiest contribute the most. The Conservatives knew that our tax system didn't work. Time and time again, they ducked the necessary reforms, leaving a system unfit for a changing economy, with unfairness that they refused to address. Currently, a landlord with an income of £25,000 will pay nearly £1,200 less in tax than their tenants with the same salary, because no national insurance is charged on property, dividend or savings income. It's not fair that the tax system treats different types of income so differently. And so I will increase the basic and higher rate of tax on property, savings and dividend income by 2 percentage points, and the additional rate of tax on property and savings income by 2 percentage points. Even after these reforms, 90% of taxpayers will still pay no tax at all on their savings. As well as narrowing the gap between the tax on income from assets and income from work, I also believe that a fair society is one where the wealthiest pay their fair share. The reforms I made last year will raise an additional £8 billion a year by 2020-30 from wealth. I increased taxes last year on private equity, private schools and private jets. I abolished the non-dom tax regime. And this year, I will make 2 changes to cap trust charges and prevent avoidance. I reformed inheritance tax on agricultural and business assets. And this year, I am aligning those reforms with wider inheritance tax rules by allowing the transfer of the 100% relief allowance between spouses, balancing the taxation of these valuable assets with the realities of family life. In this budget, I will take further steps to deal with a long-standing source of wealth inequality in our country. A Band D home in Darlington or Blackpool pays just under £2,400 in council tax, nearly £300 more than a £10 million mansion in Mayfair. And so, from 2028, I am introducing the high-value council tax surcharge in England, an annual £2,500 charge for properties worth more than £2 million, rising to £7,500 for properties worth more than £5 million. This will be collected alongside council tax, levied on owners, and we will consult on options for support or deferral. This new surcharge will raise over £400 million by 2031 and will be charged on less than the top 1% of properties. Madam Deputy Speaker, reliefs in our tax system cost the taxpayer billions of pounds a year, but many of them no longer serve their original purpose. The government rightly provides generous tax relief for people paying into a pension, relieving income tax on all contributions and on the investment itself, as well as national insurance relief on employer contributions, at a cost of over £70 billion a year to the Exchequer. This budget makes no changes to those reliefs or to the tax-free lump sum. But salary sacrifice for pensions, which was intended to be a small part of our pension system, is forecast to almost treble in cost to other taxpayers, from £2.8 billion in 2017 to £8 billion by 2030, with the greatest benefit going to the highest earners, or to those in the financial services sector putting their bonuses into pensions tax-free, while those on the minimum wage or those whose employers don't offer salary sacrifice don't benefit at all. That is not sustainable for our public finances, putting pressure on the tax that everyone else pays. And so I am introducing a £2,000 cap on salary sacrifice into a pension, with contributions above that taxed in the same way as other employee pension contributions. That is a pragmatic step so that people, especially on low and middle incomes, can continue to use salary sacrifice for their pension without paying any more in tax than they do now, and to give individuals and employers time to adjust to these new arrangements. These changes will come into effect in 2029. The coalition government introduced 100% relief from capital gains tax on business sales made to employee ownership trusts, creating a route for gains to go completely untaxed when businesses are sold. I will reduce that relief to 50%, retaining a strong incentive for employee-owned companies. And as we work towards doubling the size of the cooperative economy, the Department for Business and Trade will launch a call for evidence on how we can better support co-ops to grow. Because of the changes that I have made to capital gains tax this year and last year, receipts are forecast to increase from £14 billion this year to £30 billion by 2030. To support our high streets, I am announcing a package of regulatory changes as called for by UK Hospitality and the British Retail Consortium. And I will support the Great British Pub through our new national licensing framework, encouraging councils to back our pubs and to back late-night venues with greater freedoms. For business rates, I will introduce permanently lower tax rates for over 750,000 retail, hospitality and leisure properties, the lowest rates since 1991, paid for through higher rates on properties worth more than £500,000, like the warehouses used by online giants. Alongside this, I will introduce a package of support worth over £4.3 billion over the next 3 years for a property of any size seeing a large increase in their bill. And to support a level playing field in retail, I will stop online firms from undercutting our high street businesses by ensuring customs duty applies on parcels of any value. I will reform our motoring taxes, exempting search and rescue vehicles from vehicle excise duty as called for by my honourable friends, the member for the Western Isles and for Whitehaven and Workington. And because all cars contribute to the wear and tear on our roads, I will ensure that drivers are taxed according to how much they drive and not just by the type of car they own, by introducing the electric vehicle excise duty on electric cars. This will be payable each year alongside vehicle excise duty at 3p per mile for electric cars and 1.5p for plug-in hybrids, helping us to double road maintenance funding in England over the course of this Parliament. And alongside this, I am providing support to boost our British car industry, increasing the threshold for the expensive car supplement on electric vehicles to £50,000, saving over 1 million motorists £440 a year. Providing £1.3 billion additional funding for the electric car grant, extending it to 2030 and taking total funding to £2 billion. as well as delaying changes to the employee car ownership scheme. In addition, we're investing a further £200 million to accelerate the rollout of EV charging, as well as 100% business rates relief for EV charge points for the next decade, with thanks to my honourable friend, the member for Camborne and Redruth, for his representations on this policy. And I will improve competition in our taxi industry by ending ride-hailing companies' use of a discount scheme intended for coach tours, as called for by Steve McNamara, the General Secretary of the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association, legislating to restrict access so that everyone pays fairly and protecting £700 million of tax revenue each year. I am responding to our consultation on landfill tax, and listening to representations, particularly from our house building industry. I will not converge towards a single rate, but I will prevent the gap between the two rates from widening to balance the need to address tax avoidance in the current structure. I will today publish Ray McCann's report into the loan charge along with the government's response, setting out a new settlement opportunity that will finally allow people to finalise their position and draw a line under this long-standing issue. And I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Milton Keynes Central, for her representations on this subject. I will continue with the planned uprating for tobacco duties that I set out last year and uprate alcohol duties by inflation, along with our plans to introduce a vaping products duty in 2026 and changes to the soft drinks industry levy announced by my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, yesterday. And I'd like to thank the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury for his work on all the tax measures in this budget. I will also reform gambling taxes in response to the rise in online gambling. Remote gaming is associated with the highest levels of harm. And so I am increasing remote gaming duty from 21% to 40%. With duty on online betting increasing from 15% to 25%. I am making no change to the taxes on in-person gambling or on horse racing. And I am abolishing bingo duty entirely from April next year. Taken together, my reforms to gambling tax will raise over £1 billion per year by 2031. As a result of the tax reforms I have made today, I can confirm that I will not be increasing national insurance, the basic, higher or additional rates of income tax or VAT. And I have kept everyone's contribution as low as possible through reforms to make our tax system stronger, closing loopholes, ensuring that the wealthiest pay their share, and building a tax system that is fairer for the future as our economy changes. On the day I became Chancellor, I said that I would judge my time in office a success if I knew that ordinary children from working-class backgrounds were living more fulfilling lives. Their horizons expanded, their potential realised. I joined the Labour Party. I came into politics because I believe that every child has equal worth and deserves an equal chance to achieve their promise. The biggest barrier to equal opportunity is child poverty. Because for every child that grows up in poverty, our society pays a triple cost. The first and the heaviest is to the child. Going to school hungry, waking up in a cold home, or in another B&B. While other children enjoy the advantages of parents with time to help with homework, the quiet space at home to work in, too many go without. And there is also the cost of supporting a family in poverty, which ends up in the lap of overstretched councils, who can do no more than shunt them into temporary accommodation at huge cost to local taxpayers. Then there is the future cost, to our economy and to our society, of wasted talent and a welfare system that bears the cost of failure for decades to come. Young people with so much to contribute but whose potential is suffocated early by limited life chances and missed opportunities, struggling to make their way in a society that did not look out for them. I don't intend to preside over a status quo that punishes children for the circumstances of their birth and demands that we all pay 3 times over for it. Since last July, we've rolled out free breakfast clubs in schools. We're expanding free school meals to 500,000 more kids, lifting 100,000 children out of poverty as we do it. We've passed the Renters' Rights Act and we've extended the childcare offer. And I'm proud of all of that. But it's not enough. Because there is one policy that pushes kids into poverty more than any other. It was introduced by the party opposite. They said it would save money and that it would bring about behavioural change, disincentivising poorer families from having more children. Well, even on its own terms, it failed. The welfare bill has continued to rise, and there's been no difference in the size of families. But what it has done is to push hundreds of thousands of children into poverty since it was introduced. They said they were punishing parents' choices, but it's the kids who have paid the price. They've paid the price for the policies of a party which opted for cynical gimmicks over real savings in our welfare system. I understand that many families are finding times hard and that many kids have had to make difficult choices when it comes to having kids. And there are many reasons why people choose to have children and then find themselves in difficult times. The death of a partner, separation, ill health, a lost job. I don't believe that children should have to bear the brunt of that. And neither can I, in good conscience, leave in place the vile policy known as the rape clause, requiring women to prove if their child has been conceived non-consensually to receive support. I'm proud to be Britain's first female Chancellor of the Exchequer. I take the responsibilities that come with that seriously. I will not tolerate the grotesque indignity of women of the rape clause any longer. It is dehumanising, it is cruel, and I will remove it from the statute book. And so, because I am tackling fraud and error in our welfare system, because I am cracking down on tax avoidance, because I am reforming gambling taxation, I can announce today, fully costed and fully funded, the removal of the 2-child limit in full from April. This side of the house. It's amazing what people get so angry about, and we've seen their true colours today. The thing they get angry about is lifting children out of poverty.
Order! Order. Our constituents will want to hear the Chancellor.
I think our constituents have heard all they need to from the party opposites today. We on this side of the House do not believe that the solution to a broken welfare system is to punish the most vulnerable. We are lifting 450,000 children out of poverty with the end of the 2-child limit. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, combined with other actions we are taking, this Labour government is achieving the biggest reduction in child poverty over a parliament since records began. That is the difference that this Labour government is making. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know how worried families are about the cost of everything. Worried that their money won't stretch to the end of the month. Worried that price... I think if you've got a house that's worth £5 million a year, you can probably afford it. But you get more exercise about reducing child poverty than you do about the richest paying more. Under this government, wages have risen, by more since we were elected than in 10 years under the last government, with lower interest rates already saving families £1,200 a year off a typical new mortgage, compared to that to when Liz Truss was Prime Minister. But I know that people still face pressure on their budgets day to day and week to week. And where there is more to do, where we can provide relief, we are doing it. Extending the bus fare cap, cracking down on rip-off price hikes, freezing prescription charges and freezing rail fares for the first time in 30 years. I am increasing the basic and new state pension by 4.8%, an increase of £440 per year for the basic state pension, and an increase of £575 per year for the new state pension, in line with our commitment to the triple lock. At the election, we promised a genuine living wage, and we are delivering it. At the budget last year, I increased the national minimum wage and the national living wage, and I am doing the same this year too. Accepting the recommendations of the Low Pay Commission in full, and increasing the minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds from £10 to £10.85 an hour, and increasing the living wage from £12.21 to £12.71 an hour. Under current plans, the temporary 5p cut to fuel duty that was introduced during the pandemic will come to an end in April, and fuel duty will be uprated in line with inflation. But I know that the cost of travelling to and from work is still too expensive. And so I am extending the 5p cut until September 2026. And because I know that changes in wholesale prices are not always passed on to motorists, I am bringing in new rules to mandate petrol forecourts to share real-time price rises through a new fuel finder, empowering drivers to find the cheapest fuel, calling out rip-offs and strengthening competition, saving the average household £40 a year. Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the greatest drivers of the rising cost of living is the cost of energy prices. The cause of high energy bills must be tackled at source, and so we are investing in energy security, in nuclear and renewable energy, and in insulation through our Warm Homes Plan. But that's not enough when people are struggling with energy bills today. The Conservatives' Eco Scheme was presented as a plan to tackle fuel poverty. It costs households £1.7 billion a year on their bills. And for 97% of families in fuel poverty, the scheme, get this, has cost them more than it's saved. It is a failed scheme, and so I am scrapping it, along with taking other legacy costs off bills. And as a result, I can tell you today that for every family, we are keeping our promise to get energy bills down and cut the cost of living. With £150 cut from the average household bill from April next year. Money off bills and in the pockets of working people. That is my choice. Not to neglect Britain's energy security like the Tories did. Not to leave working families to bear the brunt of high prices like the Tories did, but to get energy costs down now and in the future. That is the Labour choice. And Madam Deputy Speaker, one more thing. Because of our action on bills and on prices, as a direct result of this budget, the Office for Budget Responsibility confirmed today that inflation is coming down faster and will be a full 0.4 percentage points lower next year. That's the benefit of a Labour government cutting the cost of living. Madam Deputy Speaker, this Labour government is changing our country. In the face of challenges on our productivity, I will grow our economy through stability, investment and reform. I've met my fiscal rules and built our economic resilience for the future. I have asked everyone to contribute, yes, for the security of our country and the brightness of its future. but I have kept that contribution as low as possible by reforming our tax system, making it fairer and stronger for the future. I have protected our NHS, maintaining public investment and driving efficiency in government spending. I have taken action on our broken welfare system, rooting out waste and lifting children out of poverty. And I have cut the cost of living, with money off bills and prices frozen, all while keeping every single one of our manifesto commitments. Those are my choices.
Order. Mr. Rankin, Miss Moulton, your voice carries right across the chamber. Right across the chamber. Try and take a breath every so often. Chancellor.
Those are my choices. Not austerity, not reckless borrowing, but cutting the debt, cutting waiting lists and cutting the cost of living. Those are Labour choices, promised and delivered by this budget, promised and delivered by this Labour government. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Under Standing Order number 51, the first motion entitled Provisional Collection of Taxes must be decided without debate. Will the Chancellor of the Exchequer please move formally? Chancellor, please move formally.
Formally.
The question is that pursuant to Section 5 of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1968, provisional statutory effect shall be given to the following motions. Stamp duty reserve tax, UK listing relief, motion number 60. Rates of tobacco products duty, motion number 65. As many of their opinions say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion entitled Income Tax Charge. It is on this motion that the debate will take place today and on the succeeding days. The questions on this motion and on the remaining motions will be put at the end of the budget debate on Tuesday, the 2nd of December. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer to move the motion formally.
Formally.
The question is that income tax is charged for the tax year 2026-27, and it is declared that it is expedient in the public interest that this resolution should have statutory effect under the provisions of the Provisional Collections of Taxes Act 1968. I now call the Leader of the Opposition. Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I congratulate the Right Honourable Lady on delivering her second budget. I hope she enjoyed it, because it really should be her last. What a total humiliation. A total humiliation.
Can colleagues who are exiting the chamber do so swiftly so we can focus on the Leader of the Opposition? Swiftly, exit, quietly. Right. Leader of the Opposition.
It's a total humiliation, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last year, she put up taxes by £40 billion, the biggest tax rate in British history. She promised that she wouldn't be back for more. She swore it was a one-off. She told everyone that from now on, it would be stability and she would pay for everything with growth. Today, she has broken every single one of those promises. If she had any decency, she would resign. At the last budget, she said she was proud to be the country's first ever female Chancellor. After this budget, she will go down as the country's worst ever Chancellor. Today...
Order! And the Chief Whip in particular knows that we don't allow clapping in the chamber.
Yeah,
Leader of the Opposition.
Today she has announced a new tax rate of £26 billion. They're all cheering. Household income is down. Spending policies in this budget increase borrowing in every year. That smorgasbord of misery we just heard from her can be summed up in one sentence. Labour are hiking taxes to pay for welfare. This is a budget for Benefit Street, Madam Deputy Speaker, paid for by working people. This budget increases benefits for 560,000 families by an average of £5,000. They are hiking taxes on workers, pensioners and savers to pay for handouts to keep their backbenchers quiet. These are the same, yes, they can chanter all they like. These are the same backbenchers, Madam Deputy Speaker, who cheered last year when she taxed jobs and left more than 100,000 people without an income. They cheered because they didn't understand the consequences of what they were doing, and they still don't. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not been an easy time for the Chancellor. No one liked seeing her sitting on those benches as it dawned on her that her own backbenchers were going to do to her political career what she's done to our economy. But she could have chosen today to bring down welfare spending and get more people into work. Instead, she has chosen to put up tax after tax after tax, taxes on workers, taxes on savers, taxes on pensioners, taxes on investors, taxes on homes, holidays, cars, I think even milkshakes, taxes on anyone doing the right thing. She and this government have lost what little credibility they had left, and no one will ever trust her again. What's amazing, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that she has the nerve to come to this House and claim this is all someone else's fault. A laundry list of excuses. Yes. Madam Deputy Speaker, they blame the Conservatives as if we've been sneaking into the Treasury under the cover of darkness to give pay rises to the unions. She inherited an economy with inflation at 2% and record high employment. She has tanked it in just over a year. Endless excuses. She blames Brexit. She blames Donald Trump. She needs to blame herself. And I've got some news for her. The Chancellor didn't seem to understand what the OBR was saying. Inflation is up, not down, and that inflation was stoked by her tax and spend decisions. The economic fiscal outlook says that they expect inflation to stay higher for longer. Everybody else has read it. She still hasn't read the OBR analysis. She blames higher than expected borrowing costs. Where does she think they came from? Those borrowing costs are driven by her lack of grip. She is paying more, you're saying us, she's paying more to borrow than Greece. She is paying more to borrow than at any point under the 14 years of Conservative government. Perhaps if Labour MPs read a book sometimes, they would know something. That includes an energy crisis. Madam Deputy Speaker, under us we had an energy crisis sparked by a war in Ukraine and a global pandemic. What is her excuse? What is her excuse? She is taking the public for fools, but they are under no illusions whose fault this is. The fact is, the bad choices she is making today, choices to break promises, choices to put up taxes, choices to spend more of other people's money, are because of the bad choices she made at the last disastrous budget. If you want growth, you need to start with knowing what kind of country you want to be and make a plan to get there. Create certainty for the people and businesses who will drive growth. There is no growth and no plan because Labour focused on settling scores and scratching the itches they had in opposition. She promised stability, she delivered chaos. Just look at the circus around this budget. First the leaks, then more leaks to try to undo the damage. Calling panicky press conferences, U-turning on her U-turns, rolling the pitch one day only to plough through it the next. She had the cheek to talk about stability, Madam Deputy Speaker. She has become the first Chancellor in history to release the whole budget ahead of time. This is extraordinary. It tells you everything you need to know about her grip on the Treasury. She's making the UK a shambolic laughingstock to international investors, and if she doesn't resign for breaking her promises, she should sure as hell go for this. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, what have we got for all this chaos and disorder? There are 1 million more people claiming universal credit than there were at the time of the last budget. Government spending, up. Welfare spending, up. Universal credit claimants, up. Unemployment, up. Debt interest, up. Inflation, up. And what about the things that you want to go up? What about the things you want to go up? Growth, down. Investment, down. Business confidence, down. The credibility of the Chancellor, and not just down, through the floor. These figures are shocking. Does she really think that anyone will be confused by the sleight of her hand that she had in her speech? Her speech today was an exercise in self-delusion. Today, she had an opportunity to apologise and show some humility. Instead, we've been fed puff pieces in the Times and the FT showing a woman wallowing in self-pity, whining about mansplaining and misogyny. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me explain to the Chancellor. Woman...
Order. Colleagues need to simmer down, most definitely, and just breathe a little and allow the Leader of the Opposition to be heard. Leader of the Opposition.
All we've had is wallowing in self-pity and whining about misogyny and mansplaining. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me explain to the Chancellor, woman to woman. People out there aren't complaining because she's female, they're complaining because she is utterly incompetent. Real equality means being held to the same standard as everyone else. It means being judged on results. Take her bright idea, the Office for Value for Money. It's been closed down because it didn't save a penny. In fact, it cost the taxpayer £1.6 million. You couldn't make this stuff up. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've identified a way to save taxpayers huge amounts of money by sacking just one person, the woman sitting opposite. The ex-chief economist of the Bank of England was not mansplaining. He wasn't mansplaining when he said the uncertainty around today's budget is the single biggest reason growth has flatlined. What did the Chancellor think would happen when she went on breakfast telly to do an emergency public service announcement? I interrupt your Cheerios to bring you this frightening message about income tax. And then, unbelievably, she changed her mind 3 days later. No wonder people are in despair. She says she wants people to respect her.
Order. Conservative colleagues are drowning out the Leader of the Opposition speech, so just be mindful nobody will be able to hear her at home. Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Deputy Speaker, she says she wants people to respect her. Respect is earned. She apparently told Labour MPs this week, I'll show the media, I'll show the Tories, I will not let them beat me. Show us what? Making stuff up at the dispatch box, incompetence, chaos, and the highest tax burden in history. She said to them, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll be there on Wednesday, I'll be there next year, and I'll be back the year after that. God help us. She is spineless, shameless, and completely aimless. Talk to any business. Talk to someone looking for a job. Unemployment is up every single month since Labour have been in office. They don't want to hear it, but it's true. They're shouting and complaining they cannot create jobs. It is the worst year for graduate recruitment on record. Are they proud of this? Companies like Merck and Ineos slashing investment plans.
Order. If you're on the front bench, I can obviously see you, Mr. Kyle. And there's no need for you to be chuntering this loud. They can see and hear you as well. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. They don't want to hear the truth, but I'm speaking for all of those people out there who are sick of this government. Companies like Merck and Ineos are slashing investment plans. The construction sector has shrunk. How is that house building target going, by the way? I'll tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, they are miles behind and won't even come close to what we achieved. Business confidence is at record lows. No wonder today future growth has been revised down in every year of the scorecard. The papers are reporting that 1 in 8 business leaders is planning to leave Britain. Even one of Labour's biggest ever donors, Lakshmi Mittal, has fled the country.
Fled. With the passport.
What we have in front of us is a budget littered with broken promises. She stood on a manifesto which promised better returns for UK savers. Today, she's putting up taxes on savings, on salary sacrifice even. She promised to give pensioners the security and retirement they deserve. Today, she slapped higher taxes on people saving for their pensions. She promised to make Britain the best place in the world to invest and do business. Today, she has raised the dividend tax rates. She and the Prime Minister had already broken their promise to freeze council tax, but today she's decided to go even further, introducing a new property tax clobbering family homes that will only raise small amounts. This is Labour's Britain. This is Labour's Britain. People who work hard, Madam Deputy Speaker, people who work hard and save hard to buy their homes get taxed more, while those who don't work, who in some cases refuse to work, get their accommodation paid for by taxpayers. And then to top it all off, because taxing your home, your car, your savings and your pension wasn't enough, she has, by her own admission, broken her manifesto promise on income tax. Because in the last budget, she said, and I quote, "I am keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto, so there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax thresholds." She said in that budget that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people and take money out of their payslips. But today, she has done exactly that. Why should anyone believe anything she's promised in this budget? And so where is the money going? Small changes to rail fares and prescriptions, these are distractions while she steals your wallet. The real story here, Madam Deputy Speaker, the real story is that Labour have lost control of welfare spending. Not only will working people have their tax thresholds frozen while benefits go up in line with inflation, not only have Labour abandoned reforms that would have saved the taxpayer £5 billion after pressure from these backbenchers, today they have added another £3 billion to the bill by scrapping the two-child benefit cap. We introduced that cap, Madam Deputy Speaker, because it means people on benefits have to make the same decisions about having children as everyone else. Even Labour voters know that it strikes the right balance between supporting people who are struggling and protecting taxpayers who are struggling themselves. Just this summer, the Chancellor admitted that lifting the two-child benefit cap was not affordable. But that was before the Prime Minister accidentally fired the starting gun on the race to replace him. So now he and the Chancellor are buying the votes of their own MPs with taxpayers' money. If she wants to reduce child poverty, she should stop taxing their parents and stop destroying their jobs. She congratulated herself on a new tax on landlords. Let me tell her this. Hiking tax on landlords will only push up rents. It will push landlords out of the market. The people who will suffer are the tenants. And then she talks about taxes on electric vehicles. These changes will hit rural drivers the hardest, but we know that Labour don't care about rural people. All this budget delivers is higher taxes and out-of-control spending. Nobody voted for this. The Chancellor must take responsibility. She chose to impose the jobs tax, driving unemployment higher month after month. She chose to abandon welfare reform, meaning the benefits bill is spiralling. She chose to spend more and more money she didn't have, leaving taxpayers to foot the bill. She is out of money, out of ideas, out of her depth, and she has run out of road. The country simply cannot afford a Chancellor who can't keep her own promises. Her position is untenable, and she knows it. She's talking to the Chancellor. Is he mansplaining to you, by the way? Is he mansplaining? Do you want some help? Would you like some help? What the Prime Minister should do is grow a backbone and sack her. But he won't, because he knows if she goes down, he goes down with her. So we're stuck with them both, Laurel and foolhardy. Does she have any sympathy for the people facing Christmas without a salary because of her jobs tax? For the retailers who are suffering sleepless nights because of their plummeting Christmas sales? People out there are crying. Last year, we had the horrors of the Halloween budget. This year, it's the nightmare before Christmas. And as for her, she's the unwelcome Christmas guest, 10 minutes through the door, and she's eaten all the Quality Street, Madam Deputy Speaker. But let me tell the Chancellor something she has forgotten. Behind every line in today's Red Book is a family, a home, a lifetime of work and sacrifice. People are frightened, and they have every reason to be. The Chancellor has spent the last year terrifying them. Every decision that she and the Prime Minister make puts more pressure on the people who keep this country going. If Labour are the party of working people, why is it that every day under them, thousands more people are signing off work and onto benefits? It's Conservatives who are the party of work. The Labour Party should be renamed the Welfare Party. And they are making a mistake. The British public don't want higher welfare spending. They want people in work providing for themselves. They want to live in a country where hard work pays, where what you put in reflects what you get out. And we agree with them. There is an alternative. We Conservatives have set it out. This budget could have saved £47 billion, including £23 billion from welfare. She could have applied our golden economic rule, allocating half of those savings to cutting the deficit and using the rest to cut taxes. Oh, they're all pretending they're not listening. It's the shame of the mess they've made. It's the shame of the mess they've made.
Order. Mr. Vince. Mr. Thompson, you're so enthusiastic. I was worried you were going to knock Mr. War off his chair a moment ago, so we need to calm down and breathe, and we need to ensure that we can hear the Leader of the Opposition. Kemi Badenoch.
Even the dog is laughing at the Chancellor, Madam Deputy Speaker. She could have applied our golden economic rule, allocating half of those savings to cutting the deficit, using the rest to cut taxes. She could have abolished stamp duty on homes to get the housing market moving, abolished business rates on shops to breathe life into our high streets. She could have introduced our cheap power plan. It saves a lot more money than what she announced would bring down energy costs for homes and businesses. That's what she should have done. She should be on the side of people who get up and go to work, people who take a risk to start a company, people working all hours to keep their business afloat. She should be on the side of the farmer, trying to hand something over to the next generation. The investor, deciding whether to spend their money in the UK or elsewhere. She should be on the side of the young person, looking for their first job. The saver, doing the right thing and putting money away for a rainy day. The pensioner, trying to enjoy a decent retirement. This country works when you make the country work for them. Only the Conservatives are on their side, Madam Deputy Speaker, and our plan for them is simple. Bring down energy costs, cut spending, cut tax, back business, and get Britain working again.
Colleagues are exiting. Can they do so quietly and quickly before we come to our first backbench contribution? Quietly and quickly. Other colleagues who are trying to catch my eye should return to their seats. I have noticed them bobbing. And we come to the chair of the Select Committee. We come to Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, it seems like some ways a very long time since 2022. Remember that, where we had a Prime Minister and a Chancellor who put this country in hock to the bond markets, made mortgages rise and put the British public through living hell. What a contrast with my right honourable friend today, who has put money into the NHS, is backing investment in our country, supporting start-ups and supporting the British public in a difficult cost of living crisis caused by the party opposite. And while I want to go into what the Chancellor said today, I cannot let go without making some comments about the Right Honourable Member for Essex, the Leader of the Opposition. Who was shambolic, Madam Deputy Speaker? Them. Under them, mortgages went up. And we saw children entering in poverty in greater numbers. So who is the party that created child poverty? Them, not us. And who is the party that has consistently talked down this country since the election, being negative on every stage and downgrading people's confidence in our country? Who is the party of 0 hours contracts? The party opposite. And who is the party that failed consistently to invest in our schools? The party opposite. And the NHS, and our prisons, and our justice system. Under them, this country spiralled. And I spent a decade under the last government looking at public spending in the privileged role of chair of the Public Accounts Committee. I saw those mistakes close up. I saw the big nasties left, whichever government was elected in July last year. And I commend my right honourable friend for tackling those challenges. And the productivity that we've seen challenges on as a result of the OBR's decisions has been low since 2010. And who was in government since 2010? The party opposite. So they left the legacy, they left the big nasties, and it's now this government's job to clear it up. But amid all the noise, Madam Deputy Speaker, we must remember that the markets are listening, and we need to all be responsible. Government, opposition, every member of this House. And while speculation always swirls around a budget, and that is inevitable because we're all lobbying on behalf of our constituents, our local businesses and every other group that we represent, quite rightly, to persuade our government to do the things that we want to see. And we're all impatient to see those things happen yesterday. That's why we got elected, to make change. But the leaks that have happened around this budget have been very unfortunate. And I do hope my right honourable friend will grapple with this and make sure that it doesn't happen again. And the most recent leak of the OBR data, moments before her budget, is undermining for us all. So we will be raising that with the Office for Budget Responsibility when they appear in front of the Select Committee next week. But the Treasury Select Committee looked at a number of the issues that were being speculated around the budget: child poverty, gambling tax, cash ISAs, and others. And I'm grateful that my right honourable friend has tackled some of these. I wanted to touch first on cash ISAs. We, in a report, recommended that the Chancellor didn't reduce the limit on cash ISAs from £20,000, and she's reduced it not from the 10 that was being mooted, but to 12. The concern is that for short-term savers, there can be a real issue there. And with targeted support coming next year and work on the advice guidance boundary, there is an opportunity to bring the British public into a more investing environment and to make them invest or encourage them to invest more. But after so many years, when we've all been warned that your capital is at risk, like on the cigarette packets, that you might die if you smoke, it takes a long time to turn that culture around. I do want to pay tribute to the financial inclusion and literacy campaign that the Financial Times backs, which is running a programme in Shoreditch Park City Academy in my constituency over 3 years, with years 7, 8 and 9, to encourage them to teach them about financial literacy. They will be the investors of the future, but it will take some time for those young people to get to the point where they invest. So I am pleased that the Chancellor did exempt over 65s from this limit, because that short-term saving is important, and particularly for that age group that is planning for retirement or indeed in retirement. I really welcome her support for start-ups. In my constituency, this is a huge issue, and widening enterprise support, something that I know my sister committee, the Business and Trade Committee, will no doubt be looking at. And encouraging companies to list in London, absolutely right. The 3-year stamp duty relief will hopefully be enough to encourage that. We've seen too many companies listing elsewhere, and we need them here in the UK to grow our economy and create those jobs. There's a lot of technical issues around reviews of business tax, which I'm sure we will be looking over. We're putting our slide rule across all of the measures in the budget today. I note that the Chancellor is talking about 4.9% million of efficiencies by government departments by 2031. That is going to be a potential challenge, and so I think the Public Accounts Committee, another sister committee, will no doubt be looking at that alongside the Treasury Select Committee. But I'm really pleased that she's pursuing, giving HMRC more powers to pursue promoters of tax avoidance schemes. We know what the problems have been there, and the Treasury Select Committee has the privilege and responsibility of challenging His Majesty's Revenue and Customs regularly, and they will be in front of us in January, and we'll be able to ask them more about that then. But for me, one of the central planks for me as a constituency MP of why we needed a Labour government, because of what the other party did to children living in poverty. There are 4.5 million children in poverty in this country. That's gone up by almost 1 million since 2012. 2 million of them are in deep poverty, and that's 1 in 3 children living below the poverty line in 2025 in the United Kingdom. Children are sharing beds with their siblings or parents turning up to school tired, and every weekend I visit people in my constituency and I see this challenge. Just last weekend, a woman showed me the bedroom she shares with her now disabled husband because he had a stroke 3 years ago. And she has a curtain between their double bed and a narrow space so her daughter can share their room. While in their case, luckily, they have a second bedroom where her 2 sons sleep in a bunk bed. That is the reality for so many children, and the poverty impacts their learning and their ability to perform in the world. And it is a shameful stain on this country that when this government entered power, the UK ranks 37th out of 39 advanced economies on child poverty. I will certainly go away.
Really grateful to it. I agree with everything she just said about child poverty and welcome the lifting of the cap. But is there a little bit of a blind spot for this government on rural poverty? Government figures themselves show by the end of next year the average hill farmer will earn barely just above half the national minimum wage. Is she as disappointed as I am that the government has not tackled this in the budget and indeed got rid of the family farm tax, which is going to tax many of them out of existence altogether?
The honourable gentleman is a veritable champion for his constituency and for rural issues. I think there are very big, important changes here in the minimum wage and the living wage, which will have an impact, and there's lots that could be welcomed for rural areas too. But I recognise that his constituency and mine sometimes have very different challenges, and I welcome the fact that he does champion that here. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to look through the Red Book and the Blue Book at this point, but we will bear that in mind on the committee. But 70% of children in poverty are in working families. So the idea that the chutzpah of the Leader of the Opposition to stand up and say this is a lifestyle choice for people really makes my blood boil. 60% of households hit by the limit are in work, and 15% of affected families are mothers with babies too young for work. And then, and my right honourable friend said it better than any of us could, the Victorian rape clause, the humiliation that women face, that affects notionally 3,600 women, but we heard evidence in the Treasury Select Committee of women who will not put themselves or their children through that humiliation. And any policy that required a workaround like that is outdated and long needed to be gone, and I commend my right honourable friend. And there's been further investment in young people. Certainly.
I thank her for a forensic analysis of our budget, but will she take an intervention from the Leader of the Opposition so she can apologise for this awful policy and its impact?
Well, it is interesting that they're doubling down, the opposition is doubling down on this policy, which is humiliating people. And let's be clear, the birth rate in this country has fallen year on year for the last 3 years. It is well below where it needs to be. I think only in Luton is it actually at 2.1%, which is about where it needs to be. Well, actually, it's a bit lower than where it needs to be. This is a real crisis for this country in the long term. So it's absolutely right that my right honourable friend is investing in the future of Britain. These young people may be poor, In my constituency, they're poor, but they are no poverty of ambition there. Children I met when I was elected 20 years ago are now doctors, are barristers, are enterprising business people. In spite of the challenges they face, just think about the ones who didn't get there because they didn't overcome the challenges of deep-seated poverty. So we should invest in our young people, and that is what this government is doing, including with the apprenticeships and the youth guarantee and the 9 youth hubs in London, one of which is in my constituency. And I really welcome that my right honourable friend listened to the Treasury Select Committee on the gambling taxation regime. We're a cross-party committee, but we had a unanimous report saying that there was a real issue about the lower tax on online gaming and because of the relative harm that that caused compared to going to the races or popping along to your local betting shop. So I very much welcome my right honourable friend's decision to do that, which is contributing to that, the payment to take out those children out of poverty. I do on the lifetime, the ISA changes. I just wonder, I caution to my right honourable friend that I hope that the Treasury is watching very closely the impact on mortgage lending by building societies, because in the evidence we heard that was a concern. And if we want to get people into their own homes with the building that's going to be going on, we need to make sure that those mortgages are available to them. So I hope that the Treasury is in ongoing dialogue on that issue, despite this change having been made. But we now need to recognise some of the challenges as well about green taxes. And I haven't had a chance to go through the Red Book in the time since the Chancellor sat down. But I very much welcome my right honourable friend's bold and necessary decision to take on the challenge of the reduction in fuel duty as people move to electric vehicles. This has been a point of debate for at least the last decade or so. Certainly on the time that I was on the Public Accounts Committee, we kept challenging the Treasury about how they're going to fill that gap. And my right honourable friend has been bold and right to challenge that. It's a difficult one to grapple with, but she's great that she's done that, and I think we need to be, we'll look forward to hearing more about that. And in terms of supporting people because of the cost of living, the freeze on rail fares, keeping the bus fare cap, these are things that help people get to work. And the ongoing freeze on fuel duty will help with that too. And the increase in the minimum wage and the living wage are vital. In my constituency, some people work 4 jobs over 7 days just to make ends meet. If they're lucky to have a council tenancy, even on those salaries, it's hard to make ends meet. If you try to go into the private sector, completely unaffordable if you're on that kind of income. And yet contrast that with people who earn enough to work 4 days a week because they can afford to do so. I'm not criticising them for that life choice, but that is the challenge and the difference that's faced. So the challenge on, there's been a lot of discussion, of course, about a high value property tax. In my constituency, on a rough calculation, around 1% of properties are worth over 2 million in central London. So when the opposition scream foul on this, I think in zone 1 and 2 in central London, right on the edge of the city, 10 minutes from Liverpool Street, around 1% of people will face that surcharge. That is a small price to pay when next door our families are living in the deepest poverty that I have described. And it's great to see some movement on energy bills, which is having a really, really big impact. There's a lot more detail in this budget, which the Treasury Select Committee will be looking at over the next couple of weeks. And we look forward to welcoming the Chancellor to the committee on the 10th of December, where we will both ask her to explain, but we will also challenge her, as is our proper constitutional responsibility, about the detail of her budget.
I call the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And we're looking forward to the Treasury Select Committee challenging the government on the details. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government was elected on a promise of tackling the cost of living and growing the economy, and this is the second budget where it's failed to do either. For millions of people struggling with higher bills, all this budget really offers is higher taxes. The OBR sets it out in black and white. Disposable income, living standards are down thanks to this budget. Surely the Chancellor should have learned from her first failed budget that you can't tax your way to growth. Under the Conservatives, the UK's tax burden reached its highest level since 1948 and it hit the economy. Yet under this budget, the tax burden will hit an all-time high. Madam Deputy Speaker, There is an alternative to all these Conservative and Labour taxes, and the shocking reality is the government knows it, and that's a new trade deal with Europe. A major new deal to cut the cost of living and grow our economy. The truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, Boris Johnson's Brexit deal has cost the Treasury £90 billion a year in lower tax revenue. Imagine if the Chancellor had adopted our plan to reverse those Brexit costs. Imagine how much more we could be helping families and pensioners across our country with the cost of living. Imagine how we could be ending the cost of living crisis today.
Order. I made it very clear earlier on, and you are a senior member of the House. No intervention should be made, nor will be taken. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm happy to talk to him in the tea room afterwards. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government know the damage the Conservative reform Brexit deal has done to every family and every business across our country. And yet they choose to reject the single biggest policy for ending the cost of living crisis, turbocharging economic growth and boosting tax revenues without raising tax. A new trade deal with Europe, properly fixing our broken relationship with Europe with a new customs union. Growing our economy by freeing British businesses from the costs, barriers and red tape favoured by the Conservatives and Reform. Rather than trying to tax their way out of debt, as Labour is choosing, Liberal Democrats would grow our way out of debt. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be fair to the Chancellor, she has recently spoken about the terrible damage that the Conservatives' Brexit deal has done to our economy. The deal that promised to save us £350 million a week, but ended up costing the taxpayer £1.7 billion every week. But where is the Chancellor's urgency and ambition to fix the problem she rightly identifies? Today, she didn't even mention the huge hit to the Treasury from Brexit. She is like a doctor who has diagnosed the disease but refuses to administer the cure. Refusing to take up our plan for a brand new deal with the EU, a much better deal for Britain than anything the government has pursued so far, with a new customs union at its heart. Madam Deputy Speaker, everyone but the most extreme Brexiteers now realise what a costly economic disaster the Brexit deal has been. Whether you're a young family struggling with ever higher food prices, or a high street business just trying to survive the Chancellor's latest new cost or tax, people are understandably looking for a credible economic policy to change their futures for the better. And it's crystal clear now. Only the Liberal Democrats are providing the leadership on our economy people are crying out for. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are some measures the Chancellor has announced today that we do welcome. At last, she has decided to tax the big online gambling firms by raising remote gaming duty, as the Liberal Democrats have been calling for. Problem gambling is related to hundreds of suicides every year. So, of course, online casinos and the like should absolutely pay more tax on their huge profits. Her decision to scrap the rate clause is an excellent one. And I may not have heard the Leader of the Opposition, but I wasn't sure if she welcomed that. I hope the Conservative Party will welcome that. And the Chancellor's decision to scrap the two-child limit is excellent. It was in our general election manifesto, and I'm glad that she is now enacting Liberal Democrat policy. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's clearly the most effective way of lifting children out of poverty, and it will save taxpayers' money in the long term. And the biggest relief today for millions of families and pensioners is the action the Chancellor is taking to reduce energy bills, and we welcome it. But even after the Chancellor's changes, it will still leave the typical household paying hundreds of pounds a year more on their energy bills than 5 years ago. So more action will be needed. But we need action on energy bills that works. Reform and the Conservative Party pretend that the answer to rising energy bills is to scrap our climate commitments and stop investing in renewables. They couldn't be more wrong. The Conservative reform energy policy would put up bills and just make the UK even more reliant on imported fossil fuels with their volatile and high prices. That would be a disaster for our economy, a disaster for our environment, and a disaster for jobs, and a disaster for people struggling with energy bills. Madam Deputy Speaker, a major winner from reform's energy policies would be Vladimir Putin. Now, that might explain why the honourable member for Clacton is so keen on it. So I urge the government, don't listen to the Conservatives or Reform. Be more ambitious in cutting people's energy bills. Take up our plan to cut energy bills even more right now and to cut them in half within a decade, finally giving families and pensioners the relief they need from this cost of living crisis. Madam Deputy Speaker, while there are some things to welcome, which I've just done, there are quite a lot of measures in this budget that will cause a lot of pain and unfairness, all of which could have been avoided if the chance had gone for growth with Europe instead. Her plans to tax salary sacrifice will be hugely damaging to savings and pensions, and it looks like it's another NI hit on workers, Madam Deputy Speaker. And why, when the electricity vehicle market still needs a boost to get going, is she taxing electric vehicles? And if she wasn't spending £1.8 billion on digital ID, many of these tax rises would not have been needed in the first place. And her failure to U-turn on the family farm tax is a huge error. Madam Speaker, if the Chancellor was really looking to tax those with the broadest shoulders, then why not put a windfall tax on the big banks who are literally making billions at the taxpayers' expense due to a side effect of quantitative easing? But the worst tax hike of this budget by far, the biggest tax rise of this budget, is the Chancellor's decision to repeat the Conservative policy of freezing income tax thresholds. Freezing these thresholds reduces the amount people can earn tax-free and hits the lowest paid the hardest. But I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, hearing the Conservative leader criticise it now rings incredibly hollow. And I think the member for Berkshire was objecting to her comments. The leader of the opposition cheered Conservative budgets after Conservative budgets that did exactly the same thing as the Chancellor did, raising taxes on the low paid. The Conservatives dragged an extra 4 million people on very low incomes into paying income tax and an extra 3.5 million people into paying the 40p rate. And the OBR says this government is now planning to drag a further 750,000 low-paid workers into tax and nearly 1 million people into the 40p rate. So someone on the average salary is paying an extra £582 this year because of the Conservatives' policy, and under the Chancellor's plans, they will pay an extra £300 a year by 2031. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, contrast that with our record on income tax. We raised the personal allowance by £4,000. We cut income tax by £825 for millions of people and took 3.4 million of the lowest paid out of paying income tax altogether. It is clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Liberal Democrats are the only party that believes in cutting income tax for ordinary people. Labour and the Conservatives make them pay more. As well as adding income tax bane to families struggling with the cost of living crisis, this budget will also add to the cost of doing business crisis facing Britain's hospitality sector, where she went nowhere near far enough. Our high streets are suffering. Pubs, restaurants, cafes, caravan parks, zoos, even our beloved theme parks. They are struggling against higher business rates and the government's misguided jobs tax. The Liberal Democrats called on the Chancellor to help them with an emergency 5% VAT cut for hospitality for the next 18 months. That would have been a lifeline for some of our most beloved local businesses and for people's jobs, boosting local economies across Britain. And it is very disappointing that the Chancellor hasn't listened to our calls. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I say how disappointed I am with how little there was for carers in this budget. As a carer myself for much of my life, I'm determined to speak up for the millions of carers less fortunate than I am. Millions of family carers and care workers who make enormous sacrifices looking after loved ones. Carers who keep our NHS going. Carers who keep our society going. They deserve far more support from the government, and I will keep pressing their case. Yeah. Now, I do welcome the Carers Allowance review, but it confirms our argument that the Carers Allowance system is out of date and is in need of urgent change, and we're yet to hear commitments to those changes. I welcome the decision to reassess cases where overpayment has caused huge hardship, but with the changes not coming to force for another year, the government must instruct the DWP to immediately suspend repayments during that delay and swiftly deliver compensation. More needs to be done to help family carers juggle their jobs with their caring responsibilities. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, we urgently need the Social Care Commission to actually start fixing the system on a cross-party basis and make sure our loved ones get the care they need. The Chancellor cannot claim to be supporting our NHS properly, however much money she puts in, while she and Treasury officials keep blocking the social care reforms that alone can transform the health service across the country and boost our economy. Madam Deputy Speaker, a caring society, a growing economy, a plan to drive down household bills, boost high streets and go for growth with Europe. That is the vision the Chancellor should have set out today. Yep. Instead, we got a low-growth, high-tax budget from a government that I fear just isn't listening.
Catherine West.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's an honour to follow the leader of the Liberal Democrats in this debate, the member for Kingston and Surbiton. And put very simply, this is a family-friendly budget. Every family up and down the UK will be welcoming this. Gone is the vile rape clause, and an increase in family income is very, very welcome. We've been through many traumatic times together in this House. We've been through the global financial crisis and its long tail. We've been through Brexit, and the right honourable member who spoke before me is quite right to emphasise the vast difference between our economy while we were in the European Union and now that we're not. And I welcome the work being done at Cabinet level and ask Cabinet to redouble their efforts to work on good trade arrangements under the EU-UK Security Pact to improve our economy and enlarge our economy. And of course, COVID. We heard of COVID this week with the report. And we all remember not just the impact on the economy, but the terrible impact, particularly on younger people, and the impact that long tail is having on so many of our young people who are still feeling too unwell to work or whose work opportunities have been severely reduced through anxiety, depression and all the other things which not just COVID but that context of fiscal austerity brought down upon them. Madam Deputy Speaker, I represent a multi-faith, multi-ethnic constituency which works really hard on community cohesion. When all is said and done, we rub along well together in Hornsey and Fry and Barnet. From recent rhetoric, it could be assumed that there is deep unhappiness and division. In fact, I want to put on record the opposite. I would like to put on record the contribution to our local economy from all parts of my constituency, regardless of skin colour, faith or school qualifications. Of course, my community also faces challenges. We have unacceptably high numbers of children living in households where incomes don't cover the basics, heating, eating and rent. And I really welcome today's statement on heating, help for households, on eating, school meals, more breakfast clubs, and helping in particular secondary school children with their nutrition, and rent, quite rightly introducing a little more tax on some of the landlords who, in a wealthy place like London, will be making quite a lot and can afford to pay a little more. It's my first budget as a member of the Treasury Committee, and this budget has rewarded those who fought to restore hope, stop the chaos of the 14 years of Conservative governments and deliver change. Remember the election? We promised change. Today we saw change. That change is an end to poverty-line family budgets, and the hope is that we finally see food banks close for good.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and especially she is a colleague with me on the Treasury Select Committee. In terms of the government delivering hope, a key part of the government's economic forecasting is, of course, the OBR. And what has driven a lot of what has driven the budget today is a 16 billion productivity downgrade by the OBR. We heard on the Treasury Select Committee that there was actually very little basis behind that productivity forecast in the first place, basically based on purely what the UK productivity was pre-2008, with not much real depth beyond that. So does the honourable member agree with me that the OBR has serious work to do to look at the robustness of its forecasts?
On the Treasury Select Committee for that, and I think there was quite a lot in today's budget on skills, on nutrition for children so that they can get their educational qualifications, and quite a lot that will help us to solve the productivity puzzle. But I do look forward to questioning with him the OBR on their data, how they got to that position, and how we can be helpful in pushing the government towards even more investment in skills, apprenticeships, and in deepening our investment in young people so that our productivity can improve over time. I know that so many of us here in the House are in politics because we want every child and every family to have the chance to thrive in school, in work and in life. And let's look back at past Labour governments. In 1945, despair and hunger stalked many communities. London was flattened in the Blitz, and yet rationing would continue for 9 more years. Keynes famously said, anything we can actually do, we can afford. We are immeasurably richer than our predecessors. And then what did Labour do? Went on to build the NHS, built the country, built a welfare state. We can do this. We will make the UK fairer. And today is a really good start on that journey. Very briefly, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I know so many people wish to speak today. As a former borough leader, I introduced school meals for all primary school children. It was a great equaliser and social leveller. Children were more focused, made better progress. Families who were just about managing saved money, and there was no stigma. Everyone sat together and talked with each other. Free school meals for all primary schools were subsequently rolled out across London, and we know from today that more secondary school children will benefit under the government's proposals. We need to continue to restore hope and deliver change. The two-child cap on universal credit, of course, another pro-family measure, the most cost-effective, quick measure to bring up to 500,000 children out of poverty, and paid for by the most addictive forms of gambling, which has been increased. My personal view is we could have gone even further on the gambling, and I hope that it raises between 1 and 3 billion, because I think that remote gambling in your bedroom, on your phone, is deeply damaging to society. The Trussell's September 2025 Hunger in the UK makes for sobering reading. In 2024, 16% of UK households were food insecure, which of course we know is not a food problem, it's an income problem, and this is an issue we must continue to interrogate. I'm very pleased to have secured a backbench debate on food inflation and poverty. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, together with school meals, more breakfast club provision, a higher living wage since the general election, slowly the living standards of families will turn around. It's particularly positive to see the first woman Chancellor recognise the impact which the difficult financial climate has had on families. I hope that by this time next year, once these measures are really embedded, we'll begin to see the closure of food banks. I've heard a lot about what we want to see by the end of this Parliament. Let's aim for a closure of food banks in this country by 2029. And we hope to feel that every child and every family will have the chance to thrive.
To help colleagues, they are now permitted to make an intervention, and a backbencher may wish to accept or decline that. And I call Sir Jeremy Hunt.
Budgets aren't easy for chancellors because there are so many things beyond your control, but being forced to make trade-offs reveals priorities. And I'm afraid today's priority was not economic growth, but political survival. That's because there was one central call the Chancellor had to make today. Do we reform welfare or do we raise tax? Getting our welfare bill down to pre-pandemic levels would save about £47 billion a year within 5 years. It wouldn't have been easy, but it would have meant no tax rises and plenty of headroom in public finances. Instead, welfare spend is going up and jobs and growth are going down. In every single day of the government's first year, around 2,200 people have been signed off, not just working, but even having to look for work. That's 1 million more people on universal credit just in the last year. Most of those claimants cite mental health, but every doctor I ever spoke to as Health Secretary said that people with anxiety and depression need social contact. That means being at work, not being at home. So this could, I will very happily give way to the Chair of the Select Committee.
On the point of mental health, he is absolutely right to point out that that is one of the drivers of people going on universal credit that does need tackling. So does he share my alarm that today in the HSJ it's been reported that this government is planning to water down the mental health investment standard, which starts to reverse the trend that we saw over many years of achieving parity of esteem between physical and mental health?
I absolutely share the honourable lady's concern about that. That was introduced when I was Health Secretary. And this could have been the budget in which the Chancellor announced that we will speed up treatment for people with mental illness and not park them on welfare. This could have been the budget that said that we will eliminate fraud by stopping completely benefit applications by phone. It could have been the budget that said that instead of relying on migration to help firms expand, we will make sure that people at home are fit to join the workforce. Instead, the welfare bill is going up by around £14 billion, not least because of the totally unfair abolition of the two-child cap, which I fear will see more children, not less, living in the structural poverty caused when there are no adults in the household at work. And I will happily give way to...
He surely, given his background, must recognise that there is a direct link between social policy and economic policy, that this country needs a working-age population to fund future pensions and welfare bills for generations in the future. How on earth can you do that if you're not encouraging children to be brought up and raised in a household that can afford to feed them?
Order. How on earth can you do that? We can't start off these 4 days of budget debate with the word you and your. So quickly, come to your conclusion with the right language.
Well, I think she brought me to order just at the right time.
I recognise that the honourable gentleman's concern about child poverty is sincere. I just have a totally different view as to how to reduce child poverty in this country. I think financing people to have ever larger families means more children growing up in poverty, not less. And I think the evidence for that is that under the previous Conservative government, we had 1 million fewer children growing up in workless households, and child poverty in absolute terms fell. And he needs to look at that evidence. And the taxes and the price we are paying for this mushrooming welfare bill is that taxes are growing up and they are already starting to destroy growth. 180,000 fewer payroll jobs in the last year. Unemployment up, inflation up, interest rates higher than they would have been. And the tragedy is that absolute poverty, which, as I said, fell under the previous Conservative governments, is now likely to rise under Labour as jobs vanish and welfare rolls soar. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the right honourable member for giving way. I grew up in poverty. 1 in 4 children in Bournemouth, the town that I represent here, grow up in poverty. I can tell the honourable member, growing up in poverty is not a good thing. It's an awful thing for the life chances of the child. It's an awful thing for the family that care for them. It's an awful thing for the community that wraps their arms around the child. But would he agree with me too that he is ignoring the future costs of child poverty? I used to run mental health and domestic abuse services. I can certainly tell him that when children grow up in poverty and then in later life can't find the education, training and support that they need because of their trauma as a child, they cause extra costs for the public services that we then have to meet. Does he not agree with me that we should be preventing those future costs?
I absolutely agree with him, but I profoundly disagree on the way the government is choosing to do that, because by expanding the welfare bill, expanding the number of large families living in poverty, you are making the root causes of poverty worse and not better. And let me say this, the Chancellor says that there is a growth plan, but it was very difficult to discern anything at all in today's budget. We know, for example, that raising public sector productivity to private sector levels would add 0.4% to annual GDP growth. We know that proper planning reforms would add 0.4%. We know that proper welfare reform would add 0.3%. We know that getting energy bills down properly adds 0.3%. We know that AI could dwarf all of that, according to Microsoft and Accenture, potentially adding 1% a year. But we got none of that today. Instead, we had a government arriving in office saying they wanted growth, 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 without knowing how they're going to get there. And growth needs a plan, not a soundbite. And it's that lack of a plan, or even a guiding philosophy, which is why today we've ended up with a budget that damages growth, damages investment, damages jobs, and most tragically of all, damages opportunities for young people, of whom there will shortly be 1 million not in employment, education or training. I give way to the honourable member.
Respected member of the House, but I think it's really important that we reflect on the facts. The Chancellor announced today, as did the OBR, that growth is up from 1% to 1.5% this year, and he talks about having a plan on planning reform, a subject I'm very interested in. Why then did his party abstain and not back our planning reforms?
I think he's absolutely right. We should look at the facts. And the facts are very clear that the OBR upgraded growth for this year, and then they downgraded it for every single year of the forecast thereafter. And that is why the overall size of the economy is shrinking as a result of the measures taken by the Chancellor in the last budget, and I'm afraid made much worse in this budget. And I agree with him that we do need to go further on planning reform, but I don't think we have any plan for the government for the really substantive changes that would align incentives between local communities and national government when it gets to, for example, planning approval for big infrastructure projects. And I would cheer from the rafters if we heard that from the Chancellor, because it is urgently needed. And please, this is something which I think is most disappointing of all. Please, can the government not tell us that everything is just going to be fine because they're not the evil Tories? Those terrible Tories got inflation down. They got inflation down from 11% to 2%. They saw 4 million new jobs in the economy, 4 million new jobs as opposed to nearly 200,000 fewer. They grew the economy faster than France, Germany, Italy or Japan. And they attracted more foreign greenfield direct investment than anywhere in the world apart from China and the United States. I give way to the Honourable Lady.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. Could he remind us which government led to 11% inflation? Could he remind us which government crashed the economy? And could he also speak to the 1,970 children, estimated, in Morecambe and Lunesdale who will benefit from the lifting of the two-child benefit cap, and tell them why they should continue to live in poverty?
Interventions must be short and to the point, and an actual question or a statement. So, Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very happy to tell her which government was responsible for 11% inflation. The Russian government was responsible for 11% inflation, and I will happily look in the eye the 200,000 fewer children in absolute poverty after a succession of Conservative governments because of those 4 million jobs created on our watch. And let me say this, these dreadful Tories increased the number of doctors and nurses in the NHS by 1/3. Those posh Tories increased standards in state schools to have the highest reading standards in the Western world. And that is because, Madam Deputy Speaker, Progressive instincts don't pay the bill for good public services. A strong economy does. I will give way to my
I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman for giving way. During that period, can you remind the House what happened to the deficit, which was inherited at over 10%? And, maybe we'll just deal with that.
Well, absolutely right, because the Chancellor makes a great play of fiscal responsibility. Incidentally, I hope she will correct the record when she said that she was reducing debt, when the OBR's Economic and Financial Outlook says that it's going up from 95% of GDP to 96% of GDP. Exactly. But yes, when the previous Conservative government came to office, the government was borrowing nearly £1 in every 4 that it was spending on public services. We reduced that deficit from 10% to 2%, and the party opposite opposed us every single step of the way. I will give way one last time to my right honourable friend.
Well, I thank him for giving me. I couldn't resist, as we're going down memory lane, to remind him when we came to power in 2010, we had a youth unemployment crisis. Youth unemployment plunged when we were in office. Now Labour are back in office. They've imposed the national insurance contribution tax. Youth unemployment is soaring again. Is that not a damning indictment of the party opposite?
Labour legacy.
And they might find that difficult to hear from a former Conservative Deputy Prime Minister, but they might want to listen to the Resolution Foundation, which has been saying exactly the same thing on the airways today. It has been, and no one disputes the progressive credentials of the Resolution Foundation, but they have been warning against this rise in the minimum wage and all the extra workers' rights because they say it will lead to a crisis, or it could lead to a crisis in youth unemployment. I don't want to leave the honourable lady out, but I promise that'll be my last intervention.
I thank him very much for giving way. Is the right honourable gentleman proud, and does he find it fiscally responsible that he, in his 2 budgets, left us with the lowest amount of fiscal headroom since the OBR was created, at £8.9 billion in 2024, leaving the current Chancellor and the present Labour government a mountain to climb in order to get us back to £22 billion of solid headroom?
I am proud that I dealt with a real black hole of 72 billion, not a fake one of 22 billion in my fiscal events, that I met the fiscal rules every time. And if she's really concerned about that low headroom, why did the Shadow Chancellor at the time, and now the current Chancellor, not object once to the fact that headroom was reduced to that level? I'll tell you why she didn't object. Because if I had left headroom any higher, I would have had to cut spending more or increase taxes higher, and that would have made the recession that we were heading into deeper and worse, with more unemployment, fewer jobs and more poverty. And that's why I'm proud that I took the right decision. But I want to finish with this, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, because even now, it may not be too late. A government that tries to do the right thing with the time that it has left is more likely to earn the trust of the British people than one that has given up. Please do not treat government as an exercise in survival. That would be a betrayal. That would be a betrayal of the government's mandate. People with the broadest shoulders, as the Chancellor described them, will be rightly angry today. But the people who depend on public services, people looking for a job, people on the poverty line, they are the ones who need a strong economy more than anyone else. And they will finish today feeling more scared than ever about their prospects.
Abina Apongasare.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Chancellor's budget and its message of strong foundations and secure future. It delivers on the priorities that matter most to my constituency of Erith and Thamesmead: economic growth, lower cost of living, investment in families and a stronger NHS. I also fully welcome the Chancellor's commitment of the DLR extension to Thamesmead, which is on page 65 of the budget.
On that point, the Honourable Friend give way?
Yep, in a moment. It's a game-changing moment for residents who have waited decades for proper transport links. I give way to my Honourable Friend.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my constituency neighbour for giving way. Page 104 of the budget book confirms that capital investment to fix more potholes for the Lower Thames crossing to the east of my constituency and for the DLR to Thamesmead to the west of my constituency. So will she welcome me in for thanking the Chancellor for that support, for that capital investment locally for our constituencies?
Thank my honourable friend Betsy in Crayford. We share a similar council, Bexley Council, and I know how important it is to have those potholes, and I also want to thank him for supporting the DLR to Thamesmead. This project unlocks 25,000 to 30,000 homes and also around 10,000 new jobs, about 11.6 billion economic impact estimated by TfL, as well as a crowd in nearly 18 billion of private investment over 30 years. Transformation of one of London's most underserved communities, and cut commutes by nearly half, benefiting over 500,000 people that live in the area and wider London. This is not just a transport upgrade, it is key to unlocking opportunity and prosperity for generations. It's been a community-led campaign which has had cross-community effort, and I'm proud of the role that my residents have played in getting us here. It has also been a personal priority since I was first elected in December 2019, which I referenced in my maiden speech on the opposite side. And it was also part of my 2019 general election pledge. Peter, my resident, told me last week that he has lived in Thamesmead for over 45 years with promise after promise of a transport hub to London's only postcode without a tube and train station. He and I know that so many thousands more are going to be thrilled that this Labour government is putting investment behind their community so they can thrive. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to pay tribute to the key supporters whose work have been vital. My Greenwich Council leader, Anthony Okorea, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, my honourable friends for West Ham and Beckton, my Thamesmead councillors, plus TfL, councils, assembly members and members in this place, developers Peabody and Lendlease, and of course my senior parliamentary researcher, Patrick Brown. But most of all, local people and their brilliant campaigning. They never lost faith in this project. This is a collective achievement, and this constituency should be proud of the role it has had towards this budget. I also welcome the Labour government's announcement in September that Thamesmead is one of the 12 areas selected by the New Towns Task Force, further proof of the area's potential and importance. So once the DLR is secured, schools, NHS services, jobs and communities and facilities must grow alongside new homes. This is a start of a new chapter in Thamesmead, and I'm proud to have played a part, and I'm proud of my community who have championed this project from the start. I also strongly support the Chancellor's mission to reduce child poverty, including a nationwide rollout of free school breakfast clubs. I've seen firsthand the benefits in my constituency of Willowbank and Jubilee Primary School, better start for pupils and a real financial relief for families and schools. So I was delighted to see in page 31 of the budget that from September 2026 there'll be about 12,000 more primary schools which will offer free breakfast clubs, helping 200,000 more children. And I believe that saves working families around 450 a year and ensures over 500,000 more children do not start their school day hungry. I also welcome the confirmation of further investment to cut NHS waiting times, a vital issue for my constituents, and also welcome that today's announcements of the 250 new neighbourhood health, the one-stop shops, bringing together GPs, nurses, dentists and pharmacists under one roof, starting in areas that need it the most. Madam Deputy Speaker, would you like to give way?
I'm extremely grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way. On health facilities, would you share my concern that the only thing with more leaks than the budget run-up period is the roof of Musgrove Park Hospital in my Taunton constituency? And does she agree, would she agree that those hospitals in the second wave and third wave programme for rebuild need interim funding to keep them going in the meantime across the country, including in Taunton, Wellington?
The honourable member for his intervention. I have to remind him that this government is delivering more than previous governments. You may remember that his party was previously in coalition with the previous government that caused a lot of damage to this country. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to conclude by saying this budget delivers for the country, and it delivers for my constituency of Erith and Thamesmead. So after decades of waiting, residents will finally have their transport links they deserve and the opportunities that will come with them. And a new chapter begins today. And I will continue to fight for the investment, services and opportunity for my community because they deserve it.
Order of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
The benefit bill is now unsustainable in this country. And really the main purpose of what I want to say today is that I hope that we could try and create some sort of consensus in the House to try and deal with this problem, which is imposing a massive level of debt on families. Now, I'm absolutely sure that the government accepts that this burden is unsustainable, and I'm absolutely certain that if they would come to the House with sensible proposals to try and get people off benefit, Her Majesty's loyal opposition would support the government in that endeavour. The government ducked the challenge early in the year to cut benefits and to try and thereby encourage more people into work. We said at the time that we were prepared to support the government to try and deliver these cuts, and I'm sure that the opposition front bench would repeat that promise. Naturally, yeah.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. I just want to clarify that he's perfectly happy for children to continue to live in child poverty while we try to reform the welfare benefit system. Is that right?
Actually making that point because what we were discussing earlier in the year were people who were seeking work, and we were trying to encourage people to get back into work. I think the problem that I can understand the political imperative of what the Chancellor has done today to sustain her own position with her own backbenchers. But the problem is that you're going to create a perverse incentive for people on benefit with larger families to stay out of work. And I'm not sure that's good for their morale, good for the economy, good for anybody. So I think it seems a very easy hit for the Chancellor today, but I think there are going to be perverse results. I just want to also say a word about representing a rural constituency of the family farm tax. The budget's extension of inheritance tax to businesses assets over 1 million has imposed, as we know, a major new burden on long-established family farms in my constituency and elsewhere. Now, I can quite understand if the government was seeking to target larger estates, target people who were acquiring estates to avoid inheritance tax. But this new family farm tax affects not just large landed estates, but ordinary farms worked by generations of the same families. And I was actually visiting quite recently a tenant farmer in my own constituency. And this actually affects him because his tenancy, he doesn't own the land, it's only a tenancy, but the tenancy is a capital asset, and he will be taxed on it, maybe as much as £300,000, which affects the ability of the family to stay in farming. Many family farmers, as we know, lack liquid assets. They're forcing them to hold cash back, restructure, borrow, or consider selling part of the business. Because the dividends used to pay inheritance tax are themselves taxed, these family farms, face an effective tax rate of about 33%. Now, the measure affects a significant share of medium-sized, long-standing firms, even though it raises less than £500 million annually. This achieves maximum social and economic destruction for minimal financial reward. The policy discourages business growth because expanding a family firm increases future tax liabilities on heirs. Now, some advisers are recommending owners sell businesses outright to avoid future tax complications. A climate of unpredictable tax changes creates fear amongst owners and undermines long-term planning. The uncertainty over succession planning is freezing investment and expansion across affected businesses. So the arguments can be repeated, but I do appeal to the government to try and listen to the National Farmers Union, which has come up with some very sensible compromises which would keep family farms in business and would achieve the government's objective. Let me say a bit about the benefits bill. 4 million universal credit claimants are now excused from even looking for a job. 4 million, I repeat, universal credit claimants are now excused from even looking for a job. This is a disaster in terms of self-reliance, in terms of the economy and much else. Now, numbers, we know, have grown sharply since the pandemic. A surge in reported illnesses, particularly mental health conditions, is the main driver. 2/3 of recent work capability assessments cite mental or behavioural disorders. My right honourable friend, the member for Chingford, has blamed the collapse in the assessment process for the rise in successful claims. Remote and paper-based assessments introduced during COVID have weakened checks on eligibility. This again is something that we could cooperate across the House. It's not just a question of cutting benefits, it's also a question of summoning people in, helping them, giving them confidence to try and get back into the workplace. And unless we do that, and also tackle perverse incentives in the whole benefit system, which discourage people from working, then we are going to fail as a nation. Yes.
Grateful, because I like drilling into the data and getting into the facts. And if you see the correlation between the rise in people who are claiming social security and the rise in waiting lists in the NHS, they map identically through all parliaments, Tory and Labour, and therefore will you look at the data before making assumptions, and getting the waiting list down has got to be our objective.
Order. The member used the term "you" twice. Maybe focusing and looking at the chair will stop colleagues referring to language "you" twice. Sir Edward Lee.
I'm very careful, actually, to look at the data and constantly refer to facts which are accepted by the OBR and by the government. These facts are not challenged. That 300,000 people are currently waiting to undergo a work capability assessment. We need emergency measures to clear this backlog. The lack of in-person assessments, and I'm surprised that anybody could disagree with what I'm saying, has created a feedback loop where dependency grows and work expectations diminish. The longer this is allowed to continue, the harder it becomes for people to reintegrate into society. This is a system that writes people off rather than helping them back into employment. And I would have thought we could all agree on that. We must not abandon these people. This is about human dignity. Getting people off long-term benefits and into employment brings significant mental health benefits. It also helps our straitened finances. The cost of sickness and disability benefits is projected to reach £100 billion annually by the end of the decade. Now, some households receive more than £30,000 a year in universal credit alone, with disability benefits payments pushing support well above that. The current system is financially incentivised individuals to demonstrate incapacity rather than engage with work. The government has redeployed, I agree, work coaches to re-engage long-term inactive claimants, but systematic incentives remain unchanged. Failure to tackle long-term benefit dependency impoverishes the nation by increasing fiscal burdens and reducing labour force participation. Now, the Office for Budget Responsibility reports the working age incapacity benefit caseload reached 7% in 2023-24 and is forecast to hit 7.9% by 2028-29. We must stop paying full benefits to young people who are neither working nor studying. These young people should be working or studying. I'll make some progress, if I may. The Centre for Policy Social Justice estimates that by 2026 there will be a gap of over £2,500 between earnings and combined benefit income for under 25s. So I could go on making these arguments, but I'll just proceed to the next part of my speech on immigration. I accept that the greatest failure of our last government was immigration. The 21 to 2024 Boris wave, and I admit it and I apologise on behalf of my government, allowed... I don't know why shouldn't I apologise? Why shouldn't I be honest? Allowed well over 4 million non-UK migrants into the country. Many of these will soon qualify for indefinite leave to remain. ILR grants access to benefits and public services on the same basis as citizens is destroying financial incentives. The scale of this is financially significant. Now, the Home Secretary, I agree, has announced some sensible moves, and I supported her when she came to the House. For example, extending the standard qualifying period for ILR from 5 years to 10 years. As Carl Williams of the Centre for Policy Studies notes, policymakers cannot say with confidence how many migrants currently hold ILR or their economic circumstances. Experimental DWP data shows around 211,000 ILR holders receive universal credit. This is completely unsustainable. If Migration Observatory estimates are correct, between 27% and 37% of ILR holders receive universal credit. So this is a worrying problem and needs resolution. Next, increasing tax. I've long argued for a much simpler tax system, close loopholes but keep taxes low, especially for married families. Corporate tax complexity creates an inherent bias towards huge multinationals. They can hire departments of accountants to reduce their liabilities. A free market relies on everyone paying their fair share. We need creative ways of ensuring companies like Amazon and Starbucks can operate freely, we all use them, while paying a fair contribution. Then we can help lighten the burden on family farms, working people and small firms. Increasing taxes on working people risks undermining growth by reducing take-home pay and incentives. ONS figures show direct taxes reduce income inequality by only 4.4 percentage points, limited redistribution for a heavy burden. Higher taxes on the wealthy simply encourage them to leave. Data from the Henley and Partners 2025 migration report suggests the UK may lose 16,500 millionaires this year. What's the point of it? Why are we driving these wealth creators out of the country? So I'll just finish with your... there's so much to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I know that I'll weary the House if I go on too long. Can I just end by one point? It's quite controversial and it's quite difficult to say this. The triple lock, and I know I'm going to get into trouble for saying this, but I've got to say the truth as I believe it. We all know that the triple lock is unsustainable. It is you cannot have a situation where people of my generation are consuming an ever greater proportion of national wealth through the state pension. Frankly, our government never dared tackle it, having it brought it in because they knew that the Labour Party would crucify them in the ballot box. Now the Labour Party is caught in the same bind. The fact is, it is completely unfair on younger people if the burden of older people through the triple lock increases year by year. We laugh at the French because of their failure to actually achieve sensible pension reform. But we ourselves have got to have the courage, frankly, to end the triple lock. And I think this will only be done with consensus between the two parties. And I'm absolutely sure that if the government was to come to the leader of the opposition and say that this is unsustainable and will you share this burden with you, which may seem to be very unpopular, but actually, many older people of my generation, we all have children, we all have grandchildren, we all see our own children struggling to get on the housing market. So many, I think that actually if government and opposition were prepared to have the courage to deal with the triple lock, I'm not sure it would be as unpopular with older people as is sometimes maintained. And after all, we could always relieve the burden on those on pension credit. We could find ways of helping people who really couldn't afford to live. But the triple lock must go. It's not a popular policy, but I think in our hearts we know it's the right policy.
We have shy of 60 members trying to contribute, so there was a speaking limit of 10 minutes to begin with. Daniel Zeichner.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the Father of the House in his wide-ranging contribution. I think he's perhaps slightly more optimistic about the ability to achieve consensus across the front benches than sadly I might be, but I think his point about intergenerational unfairness is absolutely right. Let me start by recognising the hard work of the Treasury team and the work they've put in to this budget against what I think is a very challenging international backdrop, particularly around trade issues. And can I particularly welcome what I think is the long overdue measures on council tax for more valuable properties. Of course, no one wants to pay more tax, of course, but there are some of us who appreciate that public services and the public realm need to be properly funded. Frankly, what is extraordinary to me is the number of years that those invaluable properties have escaped proper taxation. And I'm old enough to remember how this all came about, the council tax being introduced as a quick fix after the debacle of the Tory poll tax. Frankly, I'm afraid some people on the opposition benches never change. They're always hankering to find a way to escape paying their dues. They hanker after things like flat taxes or whatever. But after 30 years of not making their contribution, I'm absolutely delighted that it's this government that's finally cracking down on this unfairness. And there are many other aspects to this budget that I strongly welcome. Many of my Cambridge constituents commute into London, and the freeze on regulated rail fares, including season tickets, will be widely welcome. But I also wish to say a few things about what the money raised in the budget is spent on. Because in my experience, both as an MP and a former minister, is it wasn't just the council tax system that the Tories broke in the 1990s, it went much wider. The fragmentation and privatisation of so much of our public realm has turned out, in my view, not only to cost us financially, but contributes to the gloom that has descended on what is still a rich and successful country. Private affluence alongside public decay does not make for a happy society. And in the limited time I have, I'll cite a few examples I've come across over the previous few weeks. The chaos in our prison and justice systems goes back in no small part to the disastrous policies pursued by Chris Grayling in his misguided attempts to privatise the probation service, from which, in my view, it has never fully recovered. And the fragmentation of services was made particularly clear to me recently, when residents in a very modern development near Cambridge railway station complained to me about the problems they were facing with both criminal behaviour and poor building standards. Now, the housing associations turned out in force to meet me. It's amazing what a visit from an MP will do. And they told me about the labyrinth of organisations involved in these issues. At least 2 councils, the police, those responsible for developing the building, those responsible separately for maintaining the building, those responsible for fire safety. How could anyone come to a sensible solution with all that? I came away very clear on one thing. No one seemed to take responsibility overall, and as a consequence, the residents have got a very poor deal. And another example, the rightful national outcry over the abuse of too many neighbourhood shops selling vapes and smuggled cigarettes, exposed so well by BBC investigative reporters. And I can't be the only one who wondered why it seems so hard to enforce the law when it's being flouted in plain sight. So I asked the House of Commons Library for some statistics on what's happened to trading standards officers over the years. And guess what? In 2010, local authorities spent just under £172 million per annum. By 2020, that had fallen to just over £103 million and only recovered a little to £117 million by 2024. Now, they're not the only agencies involved, I understand that, but no wonder they struggle to respond. And it's certainly not a criticism of trading standards officers. They do a remarkable job, given how they've been starved of resources. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, my conclusion is that this budget is a really good start in difficult circumstances, but that we've got a huge way to go in rebuilding the public realm so that we have a country which feels safe and secure for everyone. Putting back together what has been broken apart is not easy nor quick. It's much easier to break things than to put them back together again. We've had decades of destruction from the party opposite that frankly would only be made worse by the party that goes by the name Reform. But they too ought to go to trading standards because it's a false prospectus. They're not about reforming the country, they're about breaking it. I'm confident that people will increasingly recognise that. So I urge my Treasury colleagues to stand firm, rebuild not just our economy, but the communities in which we all live, whatever our circumstances.
Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I begin by referring members to my register of members' interests, including my position as chair of the APPG for the UAE. Madam Deputy Speaker, it didn't have to be this way. The roots of this budget and its failure began with the last one. It began with the unnecessary delay and scaremongering before that budget, which in turn frightened consumers and scared businesses off of investment. And then in turn, when the budget was announced, the Chancellor made three key errors. The first thing she did was to choose to tax probably the worst thing in terms of jobs and growth by putting up national insurance contributions. She chose to drive human capital and financial capital away from the United Kingdom with the abolition of the non-dom tax status, and she chose a totally unrealistically low level of fiscal headroom, which meant that by the time the Chancellor sat down, markets were already preparing for the next round of tax rises, and this sense only grew with the U-turn on welfare reforms. And the problem is, the government is making exactly the same mistake all over again, with the litany of leaks culminating in the extraordinary position of the OBR publishing the entire content of the Chancellor's budget before she even stood up, rendering the entire speech meaningless. And now, in turn, this budget demonstrates a simple and clear choice: higher welfare paid for by higher taxes. And for my constituents, that means higher income tax, it means higher taxes on their savings, it means higher taxes on their dividends, and in a constituency like mine, which has seen house prices soar over the past 30-odd years, now to astronomical levels, there is a real risk that older people in their family homes that they bought at very low prices are now going to have, by skimping and scraping to do so, I should say, are now going to have to find several £1,000s every year just to stay in their family home that they so love. And I think that is a real problem that is going to emerge from this budget, and I would urge the Chancellor to look at the very least at ameliorating measures to stop older people having to sell their homes in order to pay their council tax bills. But beyond this, there lies this strategic choice, and we all know exactly what has happened. The Labour leadership has watched in fear as its vote hemorrhages to the left. This budget is all about shoring up Labour's tax base. The residents of Bushey, the residents of Radlett, the residents of Potters Bar, the residents of Boreham Wood, their taxes are being hiked to pay for higher welfare to appease Labour's backbenchers. I will happily give way.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way. Would he not accept that in addition to the taxpayers that he's talking about in those communities, which I've visited and know in Bushey and Boreham Wood and other parts of Hertsmere constituency, there will be families who, amongst his own constituents, who have more than one child and receive benefit, more than two children and receive benefits, who will be positively impacted by today's budget, and he could at least nod in the direction of those of his constituents who will benefit from the measures that the Chancellor has set out.
I think that the problem with that analysis is that many people on the same street will think to themselves, I chose not to have another child because I couldn't afford to do so, and yet now my neighbour is able to have more children paid for by the taxman through welfare. And that is the fundamental unfairness at the heart of this budget announcement. But worse than that, I will give away in a moment, but worse than that, This failure to grasp welfare reform risks neglecting a whole generation. We already see young workers' prospects under threat from AI. We see the prospects of employment being hit by Labour's jobs tax and the labour market regulation, which is discouraging hiring. And now the message seems to emerge from the government: don't worry, abandon ambition, there's ever higher welfare under Labour. That's the reason why you should vote for us. I will happily give way.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend who's making a characteristically excellent speech. Would he agree with me that we are at the tipping point where the welfare state is ceasing to be what we've always wanted it to be, which is a safety net below which nobody can fall, but instead is becoming a cocoon which is going to trap a whole generation in dependency and absolutely kill off aspiration and social mobility?
As ever, my honourable friend is totally correct. Of course the welfare state should be there for those people in temporary difficulty, but it cannot be a lifestyle, which is what ends up happening. I will give way to the chairman of the Treasury Select Committee, then I must make some progress, so forgive.
I do thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way. Look, we've had evidence at the committee. It is absolutely a fallacy which we need to nail, that people choose to have more children to get more benefits. That is not the case. People fall on hard times. That safety net is there, and the ambition of my young families in Hackney is immense, but they are held back. There are a lot more systemic issues about poverty, but this will tackle it for that generation, and we need to welcome it.
Well, of course there will be the occasional person that falls on hard times, but I think she should try saying that to many, many of my constituents who are unable to have more children. They take the choice not to have it, and that option is now, there's an imbalance between that and the approach taken on welfare. And so we have a situation where at the same time as the United Kingdom is embracing higher taxes and an ever greater role for the state, beyond Europe, lower tax dynamism abounds. We can see the US surging with freer markets and a tech and energy bonanza. You only need to look to the Gulf, to states like the UAE and Saudi Arabia that are embracing tech, finance and alternative energy. Now, a generation ago, this would have mattered less. But now we're in the position where Labour and capital are highly mobile, and we are seeing more and more people voting with their feet, leaving the United Kingdom by the tens of thousands, and this tide is washing out our very brightest and best away from our shores, and I fear that once those people leave, it is very hard to get them to come back. And the sadness of all of this is that the United Kingdom remains a wonderful country. It is actually a beacon of stability with the rule of law, the English language, the time zone, great research universities and a highly talented workforce. And indeed, having criticised the government a lot, I pay tribute to them for successfully concluding a number of free trade agreements, including with India and the United States. And I hope that others will follow, including with the GCC. So at a time when other countries present challenges, whether it's the security situation in relation to China, whether it's the unpredictability of the United States or stagnation in Europe, the United Kingdom actually has a golden opportunity to be a magnet for investment from businesses and entrepreneurs around the world. But the risk is that we are consigning ourselves to a situation which a Scottish entrepreneur described to me a couple of days ago as being the why bother economy. And what he meant by that was that, of course, people aren't going to disinvest, but they won't choose to actively invest in the United Kingdom because we are not creating the environment where we are rewarding risk-taking and entrepreneurship. So if we are to seize this moment, there are a few simple steps that we could take, and I would urge the Chancellor to do so in order to light the fire of competitiveness. First of all, instead of trying to drive away the wealthiest and biggest global investors, as we have done with the abolition of the non-dom status, we should be welcoming them and gaining more revenue at the same time. One only needs to look at the Italian model, where they have imposed a relatively high fee, but in return to that have exempted wealthy mobile people from paying further taxation. As a result of that, investment in Italy is surging, and the number of wealthy people choosing to locate in Italy is surging, with all the opportunities that brings for growth and investment. Instead of obsessing with policing social media. We should be aggressively policing the sort of small, low-level crime that drives people away from locating in this country, whether it's the phone snatching, the shoplifting, or the general sense that the streets of this country have become less safe than they were a few years ago. And instead of clobbering entrepreneurs, wealth creators, and hard-working Brits with ever higher marginal rates, we should have the confidence to believe that lower marginal rates generate higher revenues in the long run and benefit absolutely everyone. And most importantly of all, in relation to this budget, instead of consigning a generation to welfare, we should be aggressively reforming the welfare state to create opportunities for all. It really isn't too late for the government to seize this opportunity, but sadly, I fear that only a change of government, and of course a change of government to the Conservative Party, will be able to deliver those things.
Liam Byrne.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I don't know what budget the Right Honourable Gentleman was reading, but it wasn't the budget that was put on the table this afternoon. Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the Chancellor got the judgment exactly right today. She had a difficult inheritance, she had a difficult hand, she had difficult decisions to take, and she got the calls absolutely right. We have a situation now, the budget now being delivered, where we have growth this year that has been forecast to rise. We have business investment over the course of this Parliament, which is forecast to rise. We have inflation, which is coming down. We have forecast interest rates, which are coming down. We have energy bills for our constituents, which are coming down. Yeah. And we have child poverty, which is actually set to collapse. That is 8,900 people in my constituency who will be better off because of this budget, a Labour budget, which is delivered by a Labour Chancellor this afternoon. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you know, I've been in this House for 21 years. I have sat on both front benches. I have sat on both sets of back benches. And so I have come to see, over the years, the selective amnesia which somehow bedevils debate in this place, and the problem of unreliable narrators. But I have to say, I have never seen amnesia on as epic a scale as I heard from the Leader of the Opposition today. Now, I think it is quite well established, Madam Deputy Speaker, that back in 2010, I thought the numbers were a little bit tight. I thought difficult decisions were going to be needed, which is why we left a judiciously balanced budget, 2/3 spending cuts, 1/3 tax rises, that would have halved the deficit in 4 years and brought debt borrowing down by 2016. That, of course, was not the strategy that was pursued by the last government. And what is the difference that that made? Well, the party opposite saddled this country with an extraordinary £1 trillion of debt higher than the situation that we left. That's why we're paying £1.10 in interest rates today, because they more than doubled the national debt. And before we hear any nonsense about COVID, let us just remember that 80 to 90% of the increase in debt that the Conservative saddles us with was before the COVID lockdowns began. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Oh, nothing as contemporary as COVID, don't worry about that. I just wondered how much money he left in the coffers when he was Chief Secretary in 1997.
Well, I can tell him. I don't know what his faculty of maths is like. I don't know if he realises that a trillion has 12 noughts. But we left the national debt £1 trillion lower than it is today. £2.7 trillion. That is how much this country is now borrowing. Now, the great tragedy, of course, of all of this is that if they had borrowed money at low interest costs and actually invested it in something that enhanced productivity, we would be in a better position today. The Chancellor wouldn't have had to deliver the budget that she had to deliver today. And don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Look at the International Monetary Fund. 25th of July. The report is very clear. The fact is that our productivity growth under the party opposite collapsed by 1/3 compared to the good old New Labour years. Our productivity divergence now with the United States is so serious. Our productivity growth has been half what it has been in the United States. And the OBR is really clear today. The downgrade on growth that they have baked into their numbers is entirely because of the productivity collapse, because they wasted the money during their 14 years in office. And of course, I should just say, by the by, because Conservatives are Conservatives, they managed to put £1 trillion on the debt, they managed to collapse the productivity numbers, and they still managed to put inequality up through the roof. That is why we had all had in our constituencies food bank queues that we will never forget. I will never forget, for as long as I live, the phenomenon of collecting food in inner city Birmingham because our food banks had run out of food. I will never forget the children at Adderley School who were literally helping restock our food banks by taking penguin bars out of their lunch boxes to put them in food collection crates so that their classmates didn't go hungry at lunchtime. That's the reality of the child poverty legacy that this party left us with, and that is the legacy that the Chancellor got to grips with today. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we look forward on our committee to scrutinising the proposals that have been laid out today. We have been travelling the country over the last couple of weeks, talking to business about what they wanted out of this budget. And there were three things that were very clear. What is extraordinary about this country? These are aisles of wonder. We now stand on the threshold of an extraordinary new era of innovation. This is an extraordinary country. We are an inventive country. We have been since the Industrial Revolution started in Birmingham back in 1761. But that is going to be as of nothing compared to what is about to unfold in this country, and we are at the front of the grid in the race for the 21st century. But we need to mobilise capital on a completely new scale, and that is why certainty for business was so important. So I welcome the fact that the headroom has been put up to £22 billion a day. I welcome the Chancellor is ending this biannual circus of fiscal speculation by having one forecast a year. I have to say to the House that I seriously think that Mr Hughes needs to consider his position. The fact that we have had a leak of the OBR forecast before this House got to debate the budget, I think is appalling, and it has bedevilled us, this uncertainty. Now, alongside that, we have got to step up the mobilisation of capital on a completely different scale. I will in a moment. That's why I absolutely welcome the package that the Chancellor has set out today to mobilise investment capital in a completely radically new way. The expanding of EMI, the boosting of VCTs, the UK listing relief, that is almost £3 billion worth of extra incentives for our entrepreneurs in this country. That is a game changer, not just for start-ups, but for scale-ups who are trying to make sure that we end this craziness of brilliant people in this country, brilliant inventors in this country, starting new businesses, growing it nicely, and then getting snapped up and shifted out to the United States. We have to make sure that we are growing and fostering more big, global dominating companies here in this country. So I welcome the way the Chancellor lent in behind those firms today. But the third thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we've got to do is to improve the return on investment of investments made in this country. So that means a couple of things. It means bringing down energy costs radically. We didn't have a business energy cost scheme scored in the budget today, but that is because I know the government is now out to consultation. Every single member of our committee would implore the government to do whatever it takes to make sure business energy costs in our country are internationally competitive. It is wrong that firms like Nissan say to us that their energy costs up in Sunderland are the most expensive energy costs of any Nissan plant in the world. We have got to bring business energy costs down. But the message alongside that we hear from small business in particular is that we have also got to bring down business rates. So, looking at the policy decisions in the scorecard, that looks like about a £4.2 billion subsidy to help bring business rates down. That should mean that we have the lowest business rates that we have seen in this country. That is a very good thing. But where I would urge the Chancellor to go further is in making sure that we actually cut the costs of red tape in a really bold and radical way. As we travelled around the country, Madam Deputy Speaker, business after business told us not just that they want less red tape, they want better regulation, and crucially, they want departments to coordinate with each other and regulators to coordinate with each other. So we don't have one department over here making one decision and another department over here making another. And so ensuring that we have a Whitehall machine that actually moves at the speed of business in this new age of AI is going to be more and more important as a competitive advantage. So look, I think this is one of the best places in the world to be an inventor. I think it's one of the best places in the world to build a start-up business. We now need to make sure that we are one of the best places in the world to scale up a business. And that will be the nature of the decisions that we will be putting to ministers over the course of the weeks to come from our committee. Let me just finish, Madam Deputy Speaker, with this point. The thing that shone through from the statement from the Chancellor today was one thing above all, and it was ambition. ambition for the future of this country, a confidence in the future of this country. That is why one of the most important numbers that we will read in the OBR forecast today is the fact that business investment is not flat, it's not falling, it's soaring. It is set to soar by £6 billion over the course of the forecast period. That ambition for this country is a sharp contrast to the amnesia of the party opposite, and that is because we on this side of the House know how futures are really built.
The speaking limits are now 8 minutes, and I call Dave Dugan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Right Honourable Member for Birmingham, Hodge Hill and Solihull for a fascinating lecture on amnesia, dripping with irony, given the last role he had in government. I wish to congratulate the Chancellor on delivering what is almost certainly her final budget. There is no conceivable way that she can remain in post either politically and certainly not economically for a further year. Businesses, workers, bill payers, farmers, hospices, industry and the public sector cannot endure another cycle of this Chancellor. It's just over a year since she stood at that dispatch box delivering her first budget and boasted that she had made the right choices. Well, if only anyone outside the real economy believed that, we wouldn't be in this situation right now. She promised to restore stability to the public finances, and she promised to drive down growth right across the country. She told us that growth would be her central budget mission, but last month the IMF forecast that UK will have the lowest per capita growth in the G7 next year at just 0.5% compared to an average of 1.4% for advanced economies. Labour promised to turn the page on high food prices, but households see food inflation running out of control and hitting 4.9% last month. The Chancellor promised more jobs to tackle poverty, but this month unemployment hit 5%, the highest level since the pandemic, while poverty is now at record levels. Government borrowing stands at a 5-year high, £17.4 billion in October alone, with Labour spending double the defence budget every year just servicing the UK's chronic national debt. And the OECD have downgraded the UK's economic prospects, singling out the Chancellor's policies as exposing the economy to significant downside risk. This gloomy prognosis isn't born just from the SNP's analysis as well, however. Just listen to the Chancellor. She spent the last 18 months insisting that the economy is in a terrible state, while blaming everyone and everything except herself and misunderstanding what negativity her musings signal to investor confidence. It's as though she forgets she is the Chancellor, as yet another stream of consciousness resonates invariably negatively around the economy. She's blamed the black hole, yes, the one the SNP told Labour about before the election, and which she pretended to only discover upon entering number 10. She blamed the markets for their focus on her fiscal rules. Couldn't make that up. And she's blamed Brexit despite herself voting to trigger Article 50. But it's not just about the fundamental economic incompetence of the Chancellor. It's not even just about Labour's inheritance, which, whilst bad, wasn't the cause of this malaise. This crisis remains a product of the Chancellor's catastrophic decision, and she will own it. Just as she will own Labour's compound fiscal bonfire, she is in the frame for one of the most chaotic preludes to any budget in living memory. Andy Haldane, former chief economist of the Bank of England, called this a circus of speculation around the budget, with endless leaks, U-turns and media trails that created panic in the economy, and which Mr Haldane also added has without doubt, a shadow of a doubt, contributed to weaker than expected economic growth within the UK. There was nothing meaningful in here on energy. The measures on energy bills are a start, but they don't fulfil Labour's election promise to reduce bills by £300, and bills are set to rise in January and again in April. £150 of energy bills, Madam Deputy Speaker, will still leave the Labour Party in debt of £87 per year on their commitment at the election. And Labour's... give way in a second. The SNP did Labour's job for them with a budget proposal that involved a surcharge on banks that would have created that £300 discount for bill payers, just like Labour promised. I'm very happy to give way to the honourable member if you can tell me when Labour's going to come good on the promise.
Thank you. I do thank him for giving way. But of course, if he takes the time to read our manifesto, which we were elected on in Scotland, that promise was to be met at the end of this Parliament. So we're actually ahead of schedule. And I'm sure he welcomes that, just like he welcomes the extra 500 million cash terms, extra 500 million in cash, extra 300 million in capital
going to Scotland, and a commitment to above-inflation budget rises up to 2029. Fantastic, Madam Deputy Speaker, isn't it?
Wow, Deputy.
I'm sure the public will be delighted to hear Labour's never, never promise on energy bills, that unlike him, I don't exist on my knees waiting to get patted on the head by Labour ministers on the front bench. I'm off my knees, and the consequentials that we get, the consequentials we get in Scotland are a consequence not of largesse by the Labour Party, but of the taxes that Scottish enterprise creates within this so-called United Kingdom. Nothing here, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the energy profits levy, which is putting North Sea oil and gas into an early grave. As things stand, 42% of firms in the North Sea oil and gas sector forecast revenues for 2026 expected to come out from outside the UK's continental shelf. An analysis earlier this month from the Fraser of Islander Institute showed that the industry is undergoing an accelerated decline. In my view, Madam Deputy Speaker, a direct result of this Labour government who don't understand energy or the economy. This is Scotland's reality within the so-called union. Our future and our natural endowments decided upon by Westminster ministers rather than the people of Scotland. It must really stick in the craw, especially of Scottish MPs, when they come down here to toe the party line and see the difference that Scotland has had under the SNP since 2007. SNP GDP in Scotland per person has grown by 10.2% compared to 6.8% in the UK. Productivity has grown in Scotland at a rate of 0.9% per year compared to 0.3% per year in the UK. And Scotland attracted 135 foreign direct investment projects in 2024, maintaining our position as the top performing part of the UK in that regard. They're not so keen on the facts. And Scottish Labour MPs jump up and down about the new minimum wage, despite the fact that their constituents and mine are already on more than that as a result of the Scottish living wage at £13.45. And there was little today to suggest that Labour grasps the severity of the cost of living crisis, which for many people feels endless. Inflation has almost doubled under Labour, and food prices are up a staggering 37% over the last 5 years. People are rightly asking, what is going to sort this? Well, I can assure them it's not Labour. And on the two-child cap, I'm very pleased to see that it's gone and taken with it the appalling rape clause. It's just a shame that all the Labour MPs that were cheering the Chancellor when she announced that today didn't vote with the SNP in September 2024 when we tried to get that removed in our motion. Rank hypocrisy. Businesses in the last year are now in the position of surviving, trying to survive this Labour government rather than trying to thrive and invest. Businesses know that this Chancellor doesn't understand business. Family-owned businesses feel this most acutely, and farm businesses know that the Labour Party is out to get them. Today's announcements will not repair the damage to the reality that exists for many businesses, and it's already too late for some. Whisky duty going up again, Madam Deputy Speaker. The SWA said hiking duty today for the third time in 2 years limits Scotch whisky's ability to generate growth and will have a direct consequence for investment and for jobs. This Chancellor has run out of road with businesses across these Isles. Last year, after $40 billion of tax rises, most of that on jobs, she promised that she's not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. This government has taken the hard decisions as a result, and we won't have to do a budget like this again. 12 months later, here we are again. Another round of tax rises, and let me make a prediction. 12 months from now, we'll be back here once more, albeit with a different Chancellor. Yeah. Today's budget supports the view taxes are up, borrowing's up, cost of living is up, cost of energy is up, and spending is up, but growth is down. The central, let me remind the House, aim of the Chancellor. Scotland deserves better than this Westminster version of Groundhog Day, and fortunately, the people of Scotland will be in a position to choose that in May's elections. Thank you.
Catherine McKinnell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would normally extend the courtesy of saying it's an honour to follow the honourable gentleman, but I have to say that speech was all a bit dreeked. And I've reflected hard on this budget, as it's the first since I left my role in the government as Minister for School Standards, and as the first Labour Minister for 14 years, focusing relentlessly on more teachers in classrooms, more support for struggling schools, pay rises that teachers deserve, an inclusive school system, and curriculum reform to transform the life chances of every child. And believe me, I would have given anything to have found a few million, or indeed a few billion, behind the government sofa if there were the chance to making some of those decisions. And I suspect the Chancellor knows exactly how that feels over the last few weeks. But that is one of the reasons why I've now joined the Public Accounts Committee, scrutinising public spending, drawing on those experiences of making those tough decisions in government about how we spend the public's money. And I've really enjoyed the deep dives we've done, examining how public services are delivered, where schemes fail, making sure lessons are learned, and making sure we spend every pound the best way possible. And just last week we looked at clerical negligence, an area with a staggering £60 billion of public accumulated liabilities. And we have a golden opportunity to cut those costs and deliver better care at the same time. So I would encourage the Chancellor to read our report when it lands, because it might come in handy for next year's budget. And in the meantime, I also wanted to thank the Chancellor for her comments on the... Oh, I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for taking an intervention. I wonder whether she would agree with me that the cost of clinical negligence claims in maternity services is now greater than the cost of maternity services.
Wow. I absolutely share those concerns, and I know the Right Honourable Member for Godalming and Ash is also very keen. So I think we have cross-party interest across the House in making better use of these resources. I also wanted to thank the Chancellor for her comments in relation to the infected blood contamination scheme, which is proudly delivered from my constituency in Newcastle North. And I know the team there are incredibly proud of the work that they are doing, and they will be proud of the announcement the Chancellor made today. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, working people in Newcastle are really feeling worn down by the cost of living. We know everybody is feeling the squeeze. It's relentless and it's grinding. And I know the Chancellor knows that too, and has sought to deliver in this budget on that promise of a better life for a hard day's work. And I see there are many measures in this budget that will deliver on that. The freeze in rail fares, the extending of the bus fare cap, the measures on fuel duty, frozen prescription charges and household energy bills cut. And I also know that the Chancellor cares deeply about children trapped in poverty, and too often in families that are working hard and doing their best. And I saw those stories firsthand on the government's Child Poverty Task Force. The driving force behind the crisis is the two-child limit. In the North East alone, we see tens of thousands of children living in poverty that will be lifted out of that by the announcement today. It is both economically foolish and morally wrong. It's why charities and businesses in the North East have been calling for it to be scrapped, because poverty comes at a price. It comes at a price in NHS bills, in educational failure and in wasted potential. So I strongly welcome the Chancellor's decision to scrap the limit today. I'm afraid I can't give way because the time will keep running. But this is just a start, and it has to be in the context of wider welfare reforms that make sure that every child grows up in a home where work pays and where families can thrive. And that mention of home brings me to council tax. In Newcastle, it's felt as a deep-rooted inequality, because I looked up just yesterday 2 properties for sale. A lovely 5-bedroom house in Newcastle Great Park, £420,000 for 1,600 square foot, and a Grade 2 listed former church in Knightsbridge, 7 bedrooms, 12,000 square foot, and a swimming pool, and selling for £35 million. And if I ask my constituents who should pay more council tax, it's pretty obvious what the answer would be. Yet incredibly, my constituents will pay £75 more in council tax than that household in Knightsbridge. So I do welcome the announcement the Chancellor made today, but I would also urge the Exchequer Secretary to go further and review council tax bands, and especially how new properties in all the new estates we have growing around the country are assessed. And I also want to turn briefly to the new powers for mayors on overnight stay levies.
Of course, people flock to the North East for very good reason. History, culture, stunning coastlines, and the friendliest people you will ever meet. And it's only fair that tourists help fund that infrastructure that they use and enjoy when they stay. So I understand why mayors welcome this power and want to decide that at a local level. So it's not just set in London, but in every region, according to what works. But that levy has to be proportionate and not unfairly hit knock-on small businesses, because if they go under, we lose jobs, we lose vibrancy, we lose what makes the North East special. The hospitality sector is under incredible pressure, and I know they are busting a gut to turn a profit, and every cost could be the one that breaks them. So while I really welcome the higher wages in this budget, we do have to also listen to some of the concerns raised by the Resolution Foundation, that we don't want to discourage businesses from hiring, and especially not those young people that want to get that first job on the ladder. And finally, on electric vehicles, I do appreciate the changes that have been announced on pay per mile, but the affordability of electric vehicles remains a barrier to some who do want to buy one and they do want to do the right thing, and many workers do have access to salary sacrifice schemes to help make that switch. However, teachers in academy schools are still unable to access the scheme, and because it was put on pause by the Treasury. So I wanted to take this opportunity to make a plea whether the Treasury can sort this impasse out once and for all, because it really is a win-win for teachers and for the electric car scheme itself. So to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, the goal is clear: a country where hard work pays, where the cost of living is brought back under control, where public services thrive and child poverty is history. Every pound of public money matters, because we know that has the potential to transform lives, and that's what people rightly expect of this government, and I know that is the future that the Chancellor is working to deliver, and why she has announced this budget today.
Councillor Swain.
Deputy Speaker, I congratulate the Honourable Lady, the member for Newcastle on Tyne. She caught my eye earlier. She was cheering the Chancellor with such enthusiasm, even more so than her colleagues who were making a pretty good fist of it. I recall cheering a Chancellor during a budget speech.
Did you get a job?
And then, notwithstanding the misgivings that I had, nevertheless, I cheered with gusto. And then somewhat later, I found myself on a train to Oxford to defend the government in the annual union debate of no confidence, and received the news on the train that the Chancellor I had been cheering had been sacked. Not a particularly good wicket to go out to bat on. But I'm confident that those honourable members who cheered today will fare no better. Yeah. Because the economy is still reeling from the last budget that the Chancellor delivered, with her wholesale assault on enterprise, on family undertakings, on initiative, and on every employer in the land. But in fact, business confidence had collapsed significantly before that budget. It had collapsed in the summer when the government warned everyone that things were so bad that they were going to have to get very, very much worse. And as a consequence, we discovered later, when the budget was delivered, that things were even worse than we had imagined. But then the government announced after that budget that they'd stabilised the economy. It was over. They weren't coming back for any more. And they trumpeted throughout the last year the fact that we had the highest growth rate in the G7. Madam Deputy Speaker, that's what they inherited. Yeah. But as their monstrous regiment has proceeded, the reality is that that growth rate has become more and more anemic. There's no getting away from the fact that last month the economy shrank. And then this summer, they repeated the same mistake. All we got throughout the summer was horror story after horror story of kites being flown, of ghastly taxes that might be imposed upon us. Most unwelcome for businesses planning investment and for anyone planning to take on workers. These These interventions move some markets and make others absolutely sclerotic. It's a disaster. And when I challenged the Chief Secretary last week with the example of Hugh Dalton, who properly resigned over a budget leak, I was astounded that the Chief Secretary admitted at the dispatch box that he had no idea what I was talking about. Isn't that extraordinary? And against this background, there's always that chilling presence of the huge increase in trade union power that is part of the bill that is currently before Parliament. But their anti-growth agenda is only half the story. The other half of the problem, I thought, was excellently expounded by the father of the House. The reality is that the government's bloated expenditure plans have overshot by 4%. And we have this enormous growing benefits bill. The disaster was that the government withdrew from its attempts to provide some modest restraint in the growth of that bill. And as my right honourable friend says, we now face a bill running annually at £300 billion, £212 billion of which is for economic activity for people who are under no obligation to work. 4.3 million people, growing at a rate of 130,000 per month. It is completely unsustainable. And it's to be paid for. It's to be paid for by increasing taxes. Taxes that disproportionately attack those people who are already contributing the most. The entrepreneurs, the investors, the very people who can take their investment, their vision, their skills, their employment elsewhere to where the business environment is rather more friendly. And they're doing it in droves, and they're doing it to such an extent that even the business secretary has remarked on it and spotted it. We are facing a situation increasingly where there will be fewer and fewer people able to pay for the bills of this increasing burden of people who are economically inactive. So as I reflect on the fact that as we approach this, I do wish the honourable gentleman would be quiet. He's insufferable. As we approach government activity accounting for 45% of the economy, I always thought that, no, I'm not going to give way, I've reached my peroration. I always thought that the result would be the totalitarian hand clenched in anger. Actually, and I read, the road to serfdom. Actually, it's turned out very, very different. It's not the totalitarian hand clenched in anger. It's his hand open, dishing out largesse. It's turned out not to be so much the road to serfdom as the road to penury.
Cat Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, follow that.